we'll see how many people join us tonight or not. I'm just going to start from here and see where it goes. So every single time I'm doing one of these, I try to have an activity where we have a theme. And for this particular month, it is the Kintsugi leader, which is, of course, around the theme of Kintsugi is that something is more beautiful after it's been broken and put back together. In the Japanese culture, it is with a gold type of lacquer, and these items, porcelain items, are more beautiful and amazing than they were before. And the idea of Kintsugi leadership, of course, is that we all are broken, right? And as leaders, we all look for the way that we think about both being broken and coming back and rebuilding ourselves, but also being honest with others about that type of brokenness, for lack of a better word. And so there are a couple of different things I was thinking about when I was looking at this. And one of them is, the start of, stories of brokenness or how we've come back from being broken. And the other side of this is where or how we develop our capacity to understand what is being authentically open with others about, your areas of Kintsugi yourself, and where there's the humble brag, and then where is the I'm fine, it's all you guys that have the problem. And my frustration is how you figure out also how to do that without making it seem like you also have such large issues as a leader that people lose their trust in you. So that authenticity is a hard thing to sort of manage. One of the things I was also looking at when I was going through this is what we as leaders think are areas that we've been broken or have caused something to break and are rebuilding, and what really isn't, and it's actually something very, very different. So that's what I wanted to discuss with people today, if anybody shows up, and where we are trying to understand ourselves in that space. So if we bubble it all down to what is a leader, and it's just basically somebody who stepped in and said, hey, you know what? We need to come together. We need to go in this general direction, and I'm willing to step in and take it on. And the other question about what a leader is how far am I going to go to bring people forward, also to build up my group around me. So it's not just I have a plan and I'm going to go execute the strategies. Also, I brought the team together. I developed an understanding, a shared understanding. I brought in other people's ideas. And sometimes we forget that that is a key part of where we can break both our leadership or ourselves, and also how we can develop better. As a recovering perfectionist, I don't think you ever recover, is just sort of tolerate things better, maybe. I always have this magical idea that, I got it, I've got it all under control, and it is exactly like it needs to be. And then, as every single military strategist will tell you, no plan survives first contact. And trying to deal with the thing that is broken and saying, oh my God, my plan's not working. I've got to be more flexible about where it's going. Number one. Number two, what does my team already know that I don't know? And how badly can I break stuff by not acknowledging their expertise in this area and not just what I want it to look like? And I think those are the two things that I sort of look at and say, where in my Kintsugi, journey, am I doing a better job of rebuilding areas that I feel as an individual or as a lead or as a person who is learning, and then what are the areas where as a leader sometimes you do have to break things and you're going to have to clean it up later on, because right now when the volcano is erupting is not a good time to figure out if everybody's comfortable with whether or not we're going, northwest or northwest, right? We just have to pick a way, and some people are going to have their feelings hurt, and we just got to go with the best idea we have. So that's one of the things that I've been sort of sorting out right now with my team, and it's been very interesting to see sort of how we look at products, because we're a product company, and I come from, this is the mission side, and this is what my users want and what sells in my user space. And the other side is, okay, we know how to make this stuff. We've been making it and your users have been using it. So if you want to get there, you got to listen to us a little bit better. And figuring out where those two things are going to overlap or integrate rather is really, really, really important. And one of the things that I started to see when I would see sort of their plan and then my plan was there were a lot of ways that we were already integrated, but some of the small things I had not well communicated well, I had not captured well, and I was leaving them to fill in blanks that they felt that there wasn't realistic, because I do tend to be one of those people that go, let's go bat for that and see how far we can get. And they're like, we would love to bat for that. We'll bat for that when we have $10 million to buy a bat large enough for that. But today we have $2 million and or $200, and we've got to keep a little bit lower. So those are the things that I've been evaluating with my group right now, is where and how the close things are and what that needs to look like, and then the medium range things are, and then the far things are. And number one. Number two, if I wait to try to figure out every single part of that medium, mid, and close, mid, and far, we will never ever move. And that's my biggest thing that I get uncomfortable with is, well, we have to have a plan. And what happens if my plan doesn't look exactly like it needs to look? And I think a lot of us have those types of frustrations. Now, one of the things that I've been looking at when we're looking at our plan is some things you have a crossing of considerations, and everybody's, senior people, well, I want a name for this product. And then I come up with the name and you come up with the name, and who wins? Sometimes you need a third person to sort of figure that out, or a mission person says, which one sticks with you the best? And I don't have the market, ability to do that. So I'm going to have to sort of just go with where I am. So going back to that Kintsugi concept of, we sort of didn't meet, or we didn't exactly mesh on maybe how we are coming together in our product line, but that's okay, because I'm not going forward with a million labels today. So I don't have to decide whether I'm going to call it need with a K, or a need with an N, or need with, some kind of Prince type imaginary letters, right? We can have a conversation about playing with concepts and sort of meaning ideas, as long as our product concepts are something that, one, our investors understand, two, our mission users are going to be able to remember and say, I want this pair of socks. And you call socks something weird that I can't remember, so I'm just going to call it socks. Figure out a way to call it socks, because that's what I want you to call. And I think when we talk about Kintsugi's ideas and Kintsugi concepts, it's understanding where we need to make those breaks and reshape things so it makes more sense. And where we're going to make breaks, and that's part of leadership. And then what if we do break, or if something breaks within our leadership, both ourselves and our group, how we're going to reform. And the fact that reforming will look different, and as the saying goes, nobody likes change except for a wet baby. So these are the things that are very hard for me also to get through, is that concept of now I've got to change and reach into the getting comfortable with an area I don't want to change because I think it's just fine, even though I know it's broken, or I'm just going to put one dab of glue on it, and really it's got a whole piece missing out of it. So I better figure out a way to, patch it with a tile. And stepping back into those moments is, I'd say, a foundational aspect of Space to Fail. It's that idea that we are failing, but how we're going to get there on the other side to fix it, right? And hey, Zach.
Hello.
How you doing?
Not bad. I actually just got done with a swim meet. Or not swim meet, but like a swim exercise thing. So it's all good.
All right, you're a little bit trying to get your volume up a little bit here.
I'm in my car. So
okay. So I think it's just you and I so far. I was actually doing sort of a soliloquy on what I was thinking about what Kintsugi was in our products, because I've got that's what my new stuff is, and how you think like you got it figured out, like right down to the name, and then people go, yeah, that sucks, not going to work for me. And I wonder if you as a cyber guy also see the same things, where you have a really good idea for like a product name or a concept, and then nobody else on the team wants that. And so even though you sort of led the development of it, you did everything right, nobody's sort of pulling it on, and you feel like you're gonna, honestly, like you either failed as a leader to get your idea across, or you're not sure how to fix the disconnect. What I'm gonna do is I'm going to hide your video right now so I can hear you better. That sounds counterintuitive, but
that's
much better.
Is this any better?
Yeah. Now I can hear you
cool.
better.
So like the way Bluetooth I use, but that's a whole different story.
Okay.
For my experience, like sometimes people are just predetermined outcome before they listen to any engineering input.
Right.
So that's sort of what I've been noticing, is that there are definitely people that have predetermined agendas, and that will sort of replace the good ideas of any application, even if it works, because the politics are such that they don't want you to win.
Right.
And as far as getting around that, the only thing that I've seen that actually works is to get that particular person off the project, and then the rest of the team sort of healed from the damage that was done by the person that knew everything. Which is not a satisfying answer, but that's the answer I have. That makes sense.
So one of the things that I've been sort of watching is that people feel that also if they admit that they did something wrong, right?
Yep.
Then somehow they are less.
That's true too. Like I think, and I also think that a certain culture promotes that, because it turns out that the more you are promoted, the more you're supposed to, even if that's not the correct advice.
Right.
either you or the sponsor.
Right. And one of the things that I'm sort of looking at right now is with my group is because we're a startup, we only have the the three founders and our CTO. And okay, what kind of culture are we establishing if we can't even agree that we screw up for each other, right? But more than that, and I got to have people being honest about, hey, like this isn't working for me or you, right? But one of the other things I was thinking about was I have a very big personality and I tend to bump over people, and I've got to think of better words to use or pauses so that people can come in more.
I understand that. I think in a certain way it may, like, so it's hard because you're on a small team. So you probably all joined because you had a common idea to begin with.
Right.
Because what I was thinking of was maybe more empathy or something like that. Professional empathy could be used. But it's hard to do that when the team already has a cadence established.
That's true. Yeah, and I think as we bring in more people, though, that's also going to sort of change some things. And we were discussing what our goal was, as we bring in the next generation of developers and stuff. And one of them is about thinking differently about what I bring to a team, because so much of when we come to a team is, how many gadgets I built or product lines or hours I build. And we're much more about what we develop in the larger sense of beyond products into larger IP. And that's not about just how much you patent, it's how much you license, which is a matter of value. And it's harder for me to say, like, this has more value than that in my brain, right? And somebody goes, but I wear socks every day. And I'm like, yeah, but nobody's going to give a shit if they're 5% cotton versus 10% cotton, right? And that's a good way to stop a conversation. So I think sometimes when we put a value thing on something, it makes it even more sensitive.
I would tend to agree with that. I think also that it's hard to value a intangible.
Yeah.
So what I mean by that is just like if you are on overhead, like it's very hard, even if you do the best job ever, to actually be recognized for that work, because it is an overhead function and not bringing value in.
Right. So what should we expect our leaders to do? So there's, the model of, all the leaders also have to be billable. Well, so what? So my billable rate's just higher than yours. And then there's idea of like, are my leaders supposed to be providing strategy? Yes. But how are they measured on that? And then what does that look like? Does it look like growth of people or products or what? I think one of the things we did see recently with a shared leader was that, what doesn't work? Narcissism.
That's a true statement.
So
that will never work.
Right. But we more often than not, choose, or leaders are chosen with high narcissistic tendencies.
That's true, because that's interesting. That's a whole. They literally have podcasts on how to just talk with narcissists because of how hard they can be on individual members.
Right.
And aside from Yeah, that makes sense. I'm thinking.
No, it's because it's hard, right? Um,
Yeah.
and it makes sense. And one of the things I've noticed, like you said, the podcast, there's actually a huge influence influx of narcissism. They've said it's gone up quite a lot, both with sort of social media and that sort of affect coming through. But I would say there's the narcissism, the person that starts social media type of narcissist, and then there's the political narcissist and the that's really good at managing that side of the space. And I often wonder.
So
that goes offend.
It's probably technical.
But
the technical narcissist.
Yeah.
There's probably technical.
What?
But the correct way of looking at that.
So John Hughes just joined us too. So we were just talking about the comparisons of how there's more narcissism in leadership than other spaces, and whether or not there's technical narcissists versus sort of the person that is a political sort of person, and then there's a sort of social media narcissist, the one who's the influencer that tells you what makeup to wear. And I'm wondering, John, from your space, you're both in the product, but before you were in the legal space, where does narcissism come into play in terms of leadership and the perception of it versus a Kintsugi, I am a flawed leader, or I have flaws too, and it's beyond the fact that I, tie my shoes left over right instead of right over left?
It's a good question. I'm not sure there's a clear answer. I mean, clearly the non-narcissists do better as leaders on some level, right? The best leader acknowledges their faults so they can learn.
Right.
The narcissists don't, which they don't tend to last long then.
So one of the most interesting things I heard from a recent leader was, and it was fascinating to see the chilling effect it had on the audience, was the problem is I'm just thinking so much faster and everybody has to catch up with me. And I was like, wow, and I didn't know if do you even realize what you said? And the answer was, it didn't matter what we said, because he only cared about how other people perceived that higher up. So
this was a situation we're dealing with tonight. It was one of actually my wife's attorneys. Because she was suing her old employer for her severance. They had made a recommendation on settlement and made a specific amount that they recommended that the next offer be X. That was made, and the other side didn't like it and said, we're not going to make another offer because that's too ridiculous, so you need to come down. Well, the attorneys then decided it was not them that made that recommendation, it was Amanda. That they could never have given bad advice. It was the client who didn't take their advice, and therefore, unless she pays them an astronomical amount, they're terminating litigation, terminating their representation. I just emailed them back a picture of their email.
Right.
They said we recommend X.
Right.
And the concept that someone would be so daft as to think, my interaction with them back was simply along the lines of, we understand we made an offer of X. You're now saying it should be Y. What's changed to justify your position?
Right.
Not challenging them, but just as a client wanting to know, did a law come out? Did the facts change? Like what happened?
Right.
That's all we need to know. Won't answer. How dare they get questioned?
Wow.
And that's just like, great. You shit unicorn fairies, whatever, like, good for you. You'll get, makes my job easier.
So the answer usually is like, that's awesome. Let me fire you fast, right?
Well, they fire, they terminate. Their threat was to terminate themselves. I'm like, great, go terminate yourself.
Right. The thing I always wonder about, it seems like so many leaders do that. And you got to wonder, like, at what point does it become painful for them, and then somebody fires them out of that leadership position? Because that's what I sort of see, is that toxicity never seems to take hold, and they just go for new levels of bottom.
Look at Sam Altman might be a good example, right? With everyone leaving OpenAI,
Right.
is he just like, is OpenAI really just Sam Altman, or was it really the four of them that started it together? You know, was it the CTO, the Miro, whatever? You know, was it really the group, or is he such the narcissist that he thinks it was just him?
So, do we know any inside baseball about why people are leaving? Are they getting hired away? Are they getting?
It's no longer a not-for-profit. Now it's a for-profit.
Okay.
So I think that changes the dynamic in terms of where most of them were taking the technology and what they were comfortable with it doing.
So, as somebody who worked for a not-for-profit, the first statement after that, we're a not-for-profit, we're also not for loss. So, you know, there's,
They still make money, like Red Cross. Red Cross still gets paid handsomely as a not-for-profit.
Right.
But I think it changes the dynamic of how they approach. I mean, if you are purely bottom line driven in an area where you're dealing with high ethics, etc., it puts that additional pressure on the ethics associated with what they're doing.
But you still have to pay your mortgage.
Sure. But I think it's different when you have, it's no different being a startup when you take capital and then you're on the table that you need to double, triple, quadruple the size of your company within a certain period of time. Right?
Yep.
That's the path they're on. Once you go down that for-profit path, that's the path you put yourself on.
Yeah.
Your investors are looking for the return.
Right.
They're no longer looking at this as it's a donation, it's a altruistic cause, that this has a higher purpose, and we don't need to make our 100x off of this implementation.
So either way, if we look at him as what kind of leader he was, he's not going to change his leadership stripes, whether it's a not-for-profit or for-profit activity.
I suspect it will get more toxic. You'll have more of the narcissism, and you'll have more of the. I suspect it will only get worse. Whatever has gone wrong will only get worse at this point.
Yeah.
Doesn't get better.
Usually the next question that comes out is, how much is the board willing to take before they're like, you know what, we're done?
They already tried to fire him one time, clearly for a reason. I mean, it was like 6 months ago, right? They tried to get rid of him. He survived.
But that happened with Steve Jobs too.
Yeah, you know what? But Steve Jobs was an asshole. It's interesting to me where I scared Zach off.
He was in his car. He might have just gotten away from signal.
It's interesting to me where in every other place, the SEC and everyone mandates, past performance is not indicative of future success, right?
Right.
Except when we look at leadership, except when we look at these people.
Right.
You look at a Steve Jobs, he makes money. Does that mean everything that Steve Jobs does is great?
No, just ask anybody who could write on his whiteboard.
Right. So it's like, just because someone made a ton of money or had a great idea at one point doesn't mean the next idea is any good. And that's what the narcissist can't handle on some level. It's I'm great.
Right.
It's the
right.
And so when we idealize these Steve Jobs, a genius, he wasn't a genius. I mean, one of my cases for Creative Labs is we sued him on the iPod. The iPod was a Creative Labs invention. Steve stole it. I mean, and Steve made no bones about it, which is how we got so much money out of Apple. But, when you talk to someone about the Apple iPod, everyone just, Steve Jobs invented the iPod. He just, he revolutionized music. No, he didn't. He saw someone else's product and he stole it because he had more money. And we idolize that behavior, at which point then that's the behavior that gets perpetuated in terms of Silicon Valley, in terms of what makes an ideal leader. A thief.
Right.
A thief with money. Okay, now it's no surprise that Sam Altman decides he's taking over OpenAI. I mean, Musk will call him a thief for raising money for a nonprofit, but the guy's just, with his 7%, gets 150 billion. He becomes an incredibly wealthy man.
Yeah.
And it gets idolized.
But that's, I guess the question also becomes, if he was seen as more of a real person and less of a narcissist and not less of an asshole, would he be viewed as positively by other people like his investors? Or is it that Superman complex of I have no chink in my armor, and even kryptonite doesn't touch me. Is that something that is a plus for him?
I don't know. I think it's interesting. You look at like what the Forbes 30 under 30, how many of them end up in jail each year?
Yeah.
You're right. I mean, so clearly what's being idolized and what's actually happening are two different realms. There's clearly stars in there, but there's also thieves in there.
Yeah.
And the bigger the thief, the bigger the Silicon Valley lives off thieves.
Yeah, they want to see that unicorn magic. I used to joke when I was doing my capstone in business school with one of my partners, and we were trying to sort of adjust, your profit rate and everything like that. And we were like, well, how much is each piece of this data worth? And we were like, I don't know. We couldn't find out. We're like, what if we put $1? He goes, we hit unicorn like 2 years. It's like, fuck, it's $1,
Right.
And that's a lot of them. That's how it is. It's just what I say it is. And can I sell it?
So you need to be a good narcissist for that. You can't worry about other people think about you.
Right.
You're right. You truly can't.
But I do need to be surrounded by people that still, I don't want to say, well, do my bit, but work with me. I cannot do it alone. And so the other thing I wonder about is within that narcissist realm, or within any leader's realm, what's going on in that milieu that enables that? Because that person doesn't do it all alone. You can't tell me Sam Altman is doing AI code all the time, because first thing he would be doing is kicking me off ChatGPT for swearing at him and calling him a moron again.
That's why you need worker bees who will shut up. I mean, that was the law firm life, right? You would have a case staffed by 15, 20 people. The case is really being run by your junior partner.
Right.
And at the end of the day, regardless of how it goes, it's the senior partner's name that's going on the press releases, how they just did or did X, when they may have had no contact with the case. And so people, right, you shut up because then you're waiting for your time at the top. And that's what they'll say.
Piss down.
Yeah, basically, wait. You'll get your turn at the top. You just need to wait. So they look for the worker bees who don't feel that same need to have that recognition.
What is the turnover in a practice like that?
There's a reason why they're mostly alcoholics. Because you think about the personality type that can suffer with that abuse and suffer with that. Right. You're not gonna get thanked. It wasn't your idea. It was secretly my idea. Yet at some point, those people either they die inside and they're really just shells of humans, or they leave.
So I was reading up on Gen Z and the concept of, as they enter the workplace, some of the problems that different people were having, and some employers are saying, like, you know what, I'm tired of their work ethic and some other stuff, and so I just am firing them very quickly. But at some point, there's going to be a lot more Gen Z in the spaces than there were boomers and X's and stuff like that. And will that be enough to change the cultures, the business cultures at practices or at, large consulting services or whatever that have these toxic kind of environments?
I find most of the toxic environments can only last for so long. It's like a private equity firm coming in and buying a dying company, right? And they just squeeze them, and they die.
Right.
That's I think the equivalent to those toxic environments. They're just being scrolled, and very few toxic environments grow.
But they survive longer than I always think they are, because I've been watching one recently, and they're surviving even though they're losing business to the point where they have to bring in subs to fill it. And so I'm not sure, like, should my answer be awesome? I'm going to go in and now poach all my favorite people, right, and provide them what they want. Hey, Zach, or I'm just going to keep watching on what not to do. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. I my view on kind of corporate culture and isolated groups, it really has to do with the group dynamic and some of their situations. I mean, how many people at this point are just willing? They want a job, and they'll suck it up, and they'll do whatever to keep their job and keep their health
for long enough. So that was one of the things that Zach and I were talking about. Was we've got a small startup. I've got the 3 founders and then my CTO, and we're sort of establishing what our corporate culture is going to be around our behaviors now and what we value. And one of the things I was talking to Zach about was the very different way that we look at things and beyond our products. I have several different revenue streams, and one of the ones I really concentrate on is in my IP. And it's not just patents. This is not IBM. I don't give a fuck how many patents you have. It's how much the license is that comes out of it. So that means what the rest of the world values, right? So that is a very different way of thinking about how we also, what we bring to a room and how we can be creative about what we bring to a room. And I think it's going to be both very, very interesting and it could be very, very painful. I don't know, because everybody thinks their idea is really good and everybody should be using my flavor of ice cream. But, some people have this thing about fitting in their jeans, so they don't want to eat ice cream every day. So,
well, I think that's somewhat analogous to, like, for the wisdom of the crowds approach that we take, right? So the best decisions and the best future predictions come from these groups. But there's a point where increasing the size of the group does not give you a material increase in the value of the prediction. Right. So the DARPA research, I think it's roughly teams of 25 give you that 95 to 98%. Teams of up to 40 to 50 give you 99.8% accuracy. Anything over that, it's wasted space. You're adding another 50 people to the project, but you're not getting any increase in actual accuracy or value of their consensus. I think it's similar as these small companies grow. For instance, everything we do is by consensus on some level. I mean,
how big is your company in your group?
Two and a half people.
Okay, so it's a little bit easier to do consensus.
Yeah, but right, and so you could see though why that consensus works until you get to a certain size. At which point, yes, then we do need a leadership structure, and then people can speak up. But it's at the end of the day, there needs to be a core group deciding things.
Right.
So there's some consistency, etc.
One of the things I've been sort of interested in also is one of the best things I ever heard from one person is how to create equitable off ramps for people, that sort of aren't maybe the best fit, and then on ramps for people for whom what you have in mind is a huge leap for them. And when you were starting to bring in your people, right, was it, what I found with my other founders was we had a very, very similar vision. Like, we just want to do more of the work that we're doing now. How do we build that?
I think I got lucky because when I started the company with Sinead, it was 51-49. I had no issue giving her essentially half the company. Then she leaves, decides it's not for her, leaves, returns all of her equity. At which point, I'm now stuck holding the majority of the equity. As we added people in, it was a question of, okay, you're joining the company 3 years in. What do the books say? What's a fair range? Okay, they wanted between 5 and 10%.
Right.
I just give it to them.
Right.
I mean, I still hold the vast majority of the equity in the company, even with our investors.
Right.
But that's just dumb luck.
Excellent timing. So Zach, you're moving, you're sort of looking beyond sort of this accepted sort of corporate model. And, John's got his startup, I've got my startup. And when we go and talk to people like you and we're saying, we're the greatest leaderships ever. And you're like, you don't have a freaking clue. And I have stability here and it's awesome. Like, what in a leader is going to make you say, I'm out of this other group and I'm going to move over here?
That's a good question. There is partially what you've experienced, I think. So seeing the existing corporate structure and seeing that if it doesn't fit, like if there are not any relevant changes in a different direction, like that's when you start looking. It's really then becomes, what's the right place to land? For me, I would probably focus most on mission and also on probably location more than anything else at this point.
So like physical location for you to be in or working from.
Yes, those are probably the two things for me because so this is a personal thing, but like one of the things that I'm afraid of is like getting early onset on Alzheimer's
Wow.
because like that's something my mom had.
Yeah, it's frightening.
And that got her shortly after she retired. So one of the things where we are trying to do is be conscious of, as I'm getting older, and also as I'm starting to have word location issues, like, albeit part of it could be just natural aging, it could also just be something completely different. We just don't know. So
Right.
those are the two levels of flexibility. Those are two things I would be looking for in
Right.
whatever job was next, is because like I don't want to be doing something that is unethical, and I know there are some companies that are like that. I would avoid that. The other thing would be, I personally like the DOJ space. Sometimes not all the people in it. So finding a right balance there actually but like one of the things I looked for was actually in the state of Maine as a fraud investigator.
Cool.
And I
Cool
got
job.
got to the second interview with them, and like apparently I was that close. So like they went with someone I believed that was a little bit more malleable to their designs.
Right.
Which I understand that, but by the same token, it was frustrating. But if I'm going to keep my eyes open for opportunities where it's sort of in a more relaxed locale,
Right.
ideally. But
So
we'll sort of see on the mission.
did you hear what Google's, is it Google or Amazon? One of the two officially like canceled all remote work, right?
Yep, I heard
And
that.
my answer is, that's cool. Guess who wants to go grab those people? You know, and I don't know the reason for them changing that. And Chuck, one of the guys who just joined us, is a person who's part of his business to hire people like you, Zach, that do, you know, the contract development. Is that right, Chuck?
It is. Welcome, everybody. I'm in my automobile and it's dark, so that's why my camera's off.
So
I can assure you I'm really handsome. But anyway, Zach, thanks for joining. Yes, and it is Amazon that has required everybody to go back to work. And it's interesting because I just happen to have been in Seattle about a month ago, and their facilities are second to none. The office is beautiful. The surrounding, let's say 4 to 5 block area. There's plenty to do, but that's not limited to the Seattle, headquarters, right? They're all over the place. So other places might not be as nice. But yeah, that's part of the business that we're in, Zach, is it goes under the larger heading of contingent labor. So on various projects, companies will decide that, hey, we want to have a fixed cost for our labor for this particular project. And an easy one to think of is, I'll just use the state of Pennsylvania because we do a lot of business with them. And they have a Medicare modernization program. Actually, the better one is the one that everybody probably had some effect on, which was the state unemployment systems, which of course was responsible then for doling out the COVID checks. Just again, as
all the
shorthand.
COBOL programs.
Yes, exactly right. So they had to find people that still knew COBOL, but to try to
pull
move
them out of retirement. Yeah,
exactly right, before retirement or other things. But they do, they can't hire those people and put them on their payroll and pay them benefits and pensions and things like that. So they would put together a program where they say, listen, we think we need 100 people who know COBOL and 100 people that know, whatever programming language they were using. And then they would go to firms like ours and say, can you find us people like that? And that's kind of what we specialize in.
right. One of the things that we were going back and forth with, and John Fuse also is a recovering lawyer who went into software Sorry, you'll never be you'll never not be a lawyer. But
Oh,
we were
right.
discussing sort of how the legal profession also sort of drags you through and kills you slowly, one billable hour at a time or 8 minutes at a time, and how some of the emerging technologies and emerging companies are sort of changing our business models and trying to sort of bring in people, but instead of people going, oh my God, I really want to try that, they're like, no, dude, this is killing me, but at least I know, it's quote unquote stable. Even though I think it was Google that announced they were going to be regularly doing rolling layoffs. And so I'm just wondering.
Also the Capital One as well.
Really?
If I'm recalling correctly, I'm not sure.
You might be.
I'm trying to think who we pulled data for someone. It was a year or two ago on one of these issues, and it was people. They had lower turnover, and it wasn't because people were happy. It was because people were scared of the market. So without jobs and option and growth, they would stay where they are and deal with the pain.
Right.
Which makes sense. I mean, if you can get to a better job that's better for you, your health, right, that you enjoy more, et cetera, why wouldn't you take it?
Right.
If you don't have that option, you sit and you get abused.
I think also that the new issue like ghost jobs and some of the other things you're seeing in the market is people like, I've already put out 500, things, and it gets me nowhere. And I think one of the things that also sours people to applying to other stuff, right? And that's been one of my, when I was recently reaching out to people for my stuff, it was, okay, I'm at, very large company A, and what have you got that's going to be much more interesting? So I always have to have my selling game on, right, as a leader. And I don't think any of us sort of got into this role thinking like, I've got to sell people into my job just as much as I have to sell my products to my customers.
I wonder how many people would start companies at an older age if they had a choice not. If you were very happy with your job, financially and benefits, how many people would really do this? Because I was talking to someone today who has a company. He could barely wait to get it sold and get out. He really doesn't care what they offer. He's just
How long has he owned it?
4 or 5 years, 6 years. I mean, he's been in it for a while. They have a good product. They have several people interested in buying the company. But his view is basically if he can make anything, basically X, Y, doesn't have to be career-ending money, and just give him 4 years of a job with benefits, with health insurance, he'll never ask another question, never make a stink. He's just done.
Right.
And then he was joking, but the only reason, people keep saying I have persistence, etc. He's like, no, it's that I can't get a job anywhere.
Ooh.
If I can't get a job anywhere, I don't have a choice but to fight. And so I'm continuing to fight. And I just wonder, I mean, the hit rate for startups founded by people over 40 is much, much higher than 20-year-olds. But I wonder in some respect if that's because most of the 40-year-olds don't have another option. There's no place to go to.
So when my group of founders is all over 40. And what was funny was one of the investors that's interested in working with us was that we were more, I hate the word seasoned, we were more aware of what really the space was and our products and our users. And so for him, it was a huge selling point. But what you see in the world is 21-year-old, 10-year-old, whatever, straight out of the womb, startup person, right? And I don't think we are showing enough value in the people who are just doing the everyday work that has to be done to get stuff over the line.
If you're a white male over 50, you could apply to as many jobs as you want. You're not getting them at this point. I mean, I know so many that have basically just dropped off the face of the earth.
I can attest, as handsome as I purported to be, that was my experience.
Really?
Over 50. Yeah, I had, I at one point early in my career, I had a certain look and things like that. And then I unfortunately got what they called sebaceous cell carcinoma, which is basically throat cancer.
Oh.
And so that altered the way that I spoke. It altered sort of the way that I looked. And it then of course, had a domino effect on the way that I felt about myself and presented myself.
Ah,
The new world of being hired with all of the, things, and you see them all the time on television about, interview with, I'm trying to think of some of the ones that are out there. I've tried to erase them from my mind because none of them were very kind to me. But they want you to send in a video resume, some sort of, be on camera and things like that, which is completely natural to me. But it wasn't at the time because I lost a lot of weight. I mean, I just had come off of a pretty serious medical thing.
Right.
So I was admittedly terrible at it. But if you looked at my experience and my capabilities and with the jobs that were offered, I was like, it looked to me like I was a perfect match. But then you put me on camera and things like that. And those programs that are now in place are all about efficiency. Who can we eliminate quickly so that we can get to the candidates that we think we might want? I just saw a thing the other day. It said you should not put your graduation date on your resume because they don't want you to concentrate on your
ageism,
work history and what your experience has been and how well you can tell the story about what it is that you did relative to what the job description now says that we are looking for, and to make those correlations and, hey, look, I did this. It sounds an awful lot like that. I think we have a fit, but then, you add the element of a little bit older. Is this guy just playing out the string? Is he, going to be, 14 hours a day like we think we really need? So it was pretty difficult in that regard. And I never did land a job that was, video interview first. I feel much better, certainly about myself, but about that process where I could probably overcome that now, but I'm not looking, so I don't have to.
So that's, you and I had that conversation about when I was trying to get a speaker role in IEEE. And I thought I was hot shit because I'd been publishing in professional journals, in science since I was 23 years old. And so I went on the IEEE thing and I was like, yes, I'm expertise. And the first question I had was, how many Twitter followers do you have? And I was like, thinking 0 is not the number you want. And then the next one was Instagram. And I was like, also 0. Okay. And then 5 questions down was, what's your not even abstract. What are the 5 things people are going to get from this? So even in places that were originally super duper dorkdom, this where I came from, right, is now how well do you sell your ideas for our conference so our conference will sell more tickets? And that's what it's become. But what's interesting in some places, though, is there are people that I don't need to do well in front of other people because, as one person told me, her ideal job was to just be sitting in a cube coding Python. And that's cool because I don't want to ever do that. But we don't test for that.
But you see where the narcissist comes in. I mean, if your entire thing is how many Twitter followers do you have, you don't get them from communicating. You get them from making statements, often controversial. And...
Right. But that's, I mean, I when I see sort of the bastardization of science in that direction, and people talk about, oh, we need better science communicators. I was like, well, you're not maybe going about it right. But I think we can all do a better job communicating stuff, right? But I don't think that it's going to be about whether or not, like you said, I have Twitter followers. It's whether or not I can take really hard concepts like hashing my data and explain it to, my person who's doing social work and how it applies to her work, right? In a way that matters.
I think from a national security standpoint, there's so much harm that's being done by the way the systems are run.
Yeah.
That it was one of my people sent me the NATO. It was the RAND publication in terms of what NATO could do better for influence ops, and it was all this generic stuff. And my comment back to him, I don't know why he sent it to me because he knows my situation, was they should look at the contracts that they said were signed and then they didn't sign. They should look at the technology that they turned away Because what I did was I took some of that information, and for the team lead of Influence Ops, I showed him what we did for Canada. He looked at it, he compared it to what he did for NATO, and he said, yeah, yours was better. We missed X, Y, and Z. We were too myopic. I really wish ACT would have given this to us. This would have helped us. So I took that quote and I sent it right back to him. And I was like, Rand doesn't want to touch this stuff.
Right.
Rand wants just this touchy-feely, everyone's good, and all this other crap that you're doing, when, no, there were decisions made that, to the detriment, the mission suffered.
But
now you could look at those, but no.
But what you said is very interesting, because think tanks, and I know one of the think tanks I have said, they would say first thing was, we're not here to have the comfortable conversation. We're here to be the honest broker. And I was like, that's funny, because I've done that lots of times. And every single time my head was gone from my shoulders before I walked in the door. So it's bullshit.
Which is why narcissists get attention. Young people get attention. Everything else gets tossed to the side.
So you do PsyOps. How do the non-narcissists of the world become, I don't want to say bigger influencers, but get more space time so people understand the value of them?
I told you, I oftentimes will irritate people just to create an issue. I mean, I will. It's no different than a boy picking on you're a prepubescent boy hitting the girl because you want her attention. I mean,
right.
I will intentionally irritate people. So
and what happens?
Well, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It was Pablo. Someone said you guys need to talk to Palantir because Palantir really needs to use your product. So I talked to Trey Stevens. I talked to Palantir, and the word came back that Carp doesn't like me. That Carp doesn't like John Fuse because John Fuse has said some mean things about Carp on Twitter. Which when I'm like, they thought that was an insult. I was like, for Carp to care what a two-person company says and feel that strongly about it.
Pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, someone's paying attention. So yeah,
right.
So I'll keep being a pain in the ass to people. At some point, they wonder why you're still here. Like,
that's true.
Like,
right.
How did you survive this long?
But when you're looking around and you're having conversations with these people, what are you seeing in the room that they're making decisions based on? Is it
accountability and fear?
That's an interesting word, because I want my next talk is going to be accountability is not a 4-letter word. What is your term for accountability, or what do you think of when you see what accountability means?
Being held responsible for the decisions. I mean, your decisions don't have to be correct, but at the end of the day, you're responsible for them. So if you make a bad decision, you should fix it and not repeat it, right? You shouldn't be stupid. Right. But you're still accountable for your decision. So when I take the quote, I would throw it in chat. When I take that quote and I throw it back in your face, that you guys fucked up. You guys messed up.
I agree.
You're not bad people, but
I sort of come from the sports world and the athletic world. So there's a lot of coaches that I've had that had different things. And, when they talk about being accountable, they say, listen, I'm not calling you out. I'm calling you up.
Interesting.
Right? I'm calling you because I know you can be better. And I know we can collectively be better if you're better, right? Good as an individual, great as a team, that kind of thing.
Right.
So that's how I've always come to the accountability thing. It's like, look, if there's something that I can do better, please let me know. Don't let me know in my performance review after the fact that I have no chance to, correct it or do something different or come to the table with a different idea. Right. But yeah, I've always thought of it that way as, I'm not calling you out and calling you up. Like, right. I'm not looking. And it also gets back to that whole thing about a lot of famous actors will say, listen, if you're going for an audition, you have to understand that the people across from you at the table who are auditioning you, they want to solve a problem. They want you to be great. They need you to be good. So they don't have to sit in that stupid room for any longer than they have to. They find the person that they need. And that, that's, to me, that's the accountability part. Is like, look, if you're coming to me authentically and you really want us all to be better, then that's a different conversation than, I never really liked you and you're not doing great. What do you have to say for yourself? You're like, oh,
Ooh.
I didn't know that was the conversation. I thought we're all in this together,
Right.
Sabi, right? And then you're not. But that's how I always thought accountability should be handled. And if it's not, then you're probably in the wrong, the alignment is probably off.
I think that's an interesting concept for both you and John brought up. I think not enough of us think of how we're solving the other person's problem. We think of how can I sell you into, you, the vegan eater, all the bacon you can eat, right? And
Right.
I don't care. They don't want your shit, right? They want, something that maybe is vegan and tastes like bacon if they really need it. But we don't think like that enough, number one. Number two, I think with regard to, developing people, one of the more interesting people I know, Danny Ward, is a chief people economist or something like that. So he sort of thinks about people in a broader space. And he had said, hey, instead of doing, PARs or, we should be meeting with our people, this many times a month and da-da-da-da. So, of course, the corporation took it and said, okay, each group lead gets, 25.2 minutes, to speak with their people once a month about how they're doing. God help me. If you put that in an engineering company, it just goes badly in so many directions. But the thing that they wanted was what you said. These, almost not so much I spent this time doing it, is I had a conversation of some kind. And we don't do that well because we've got to have the hash, that goes like, I have 5 of these and 4 of these and 3 of these and now I get promoted. So I wonder.
I think it's going to be, I don't know if you're seeing this too, Brigitte, some of the interest in mainstreaming the autistic people.
Yeah.
Right. In terms of getting them into teams, and then how do you manage teams now with neurodivergent team members, and right, complicating that whole factor even more.
Right.
Because it changes it from.
So I actually got the opportunity to work with or talk with a senior person from the Puzzle Palace, the No Such Agency, and they have a lot of neurodivergent people before it became, mainstream. Yeah. And I said, how do you do that? Because so many groups here don't do that well. He was talking about just the layers upon layers of training they did and how they engage, and they made a lot more effort to make their managers really understand what different ways they could reach and develop their people. He goes, you've got to have a continuous way of helping people understand how they can build up and develop their teams better. And that was going on in the government much longer than anybody else has even realized it.
I guess so. Then why can't they do the same thing for Gen Zs? Why can't those same lessons of trying to deal with people who are slightly different be applied to these younger generations?
So this is what I'm observing with the Gen Zs. They don't want to go into government, and they are not getting cleared.
Who would want to be cleared?
I don't know. I love to ask permission to go to Canada. It's super fun.
We have resisted clearances at all costs.
But it's and this is going to sort of also back to some of the conversations about authenticity, right? It's you talk to some of the people that are cleared and they're like, oh, well, I can be trusted because I'm clear. I was like, I've seen you in a room. I don't trust you as far as I can throw you. And I know several different types of martial arts, and I know I can throw you exactly 3 feet. And therefore, we're not going to be in the same room together. So that perception is, still there. But until we get a different model in place, the government's going to go with that metric, right? I just have to find somebody whose life is so completely void of any real life that they can get cleared. And I say this as somebody who got a clearance at 17. Yeah. So, but it's getting hard because I know people who want to get cleared, and God help them, they did microdosing twice, right, or whatever.
Sure, we have a very liberal drug policy. We argued during the last something that we specifically did not want to be pulled high side.
What is that?
I'd rather not know. We can do our job without knowing. We can do our job without being given access to stuff.
Right.
We don't need to know.
Right.
There's no reason to take on that cost, take on that burden. I saw what it did to my father too. I mean, once a clearance is not great if you have to deal with the real world occasionally and get sued and get everything else. I mean, the crap that he would have to go through. Was it 2010 when the DOJ changed its rules, because they used to, if you had a clearance and you got called in litigation, there'd be a government attorney that would go and basically help you mine through that process, right? And then they got rid of that. You're on your own. You're told, obey your contract, do what you need to do.
It'll be fine.
And don't bother us with it.
Right. And I think that's one of the things that I saw not too long ago with somebody I know very well. And within 3 weeks of joining a new group, they were in the middle of 2 FBI investigations that they had nothing to do with. And I said, who is your lawyer in this? And he was like, I don't have one. I was like, no, that's the wrong answer. Like, no. And then it just kept going. It was like investigation of the month, pick an organization. They were looking into them. And after 8 months, I was like, I don't know about you, but my stress on this issue is super duper high. So
that's funny. Chris Rock is a comedian, and he was talking about, he was with his girlfriend, and apparently he had a 3-pack of condoms with only 2 in it. And his girlfriend started talking to him, and he goes, oh my God, I'd rather get caught stealing from the government than to have that conversation with my girlfriend. Showed up. That was one of the funniest lines he ever had. It's really funny.
And yeah, it's true. And it's so the government was recently very upset because of all the consolidations that's been going on with all their bigs, right? And so now there's like one company that does, near Earth orbit and satellites in general. And now like there's, no competition, yada, yada, yada. I was like, you guys created that Frankenstein, right? And it's more and more organizations are becoming that way. And so they're going to get the behemoth and they're creating in numerous different areas, and they're just bitching about it. So but trying to break into that space, as you know, John, it takes into connections, one, but two, you almost have to get like some kind of special permission from the Pope to not go through their, magic system of BAAs or whatever.
That's where embarrassing people just works.
You just
see, on some level, it's the accountability and being willing to complain about stuff.
But you also have the cachet and the background.
I'm a loser. I'm a nobody. I'm a guy who got sued. I got into the newspaper. Other than that, there's nothing special about
above the fold. Like, that's pretty amazing.
I know, but so I got sued. I got sued by a crazy person. But other than that, no one has known who I am.
I don't know. I mean, outside, you mean your potential area of expertise? Yeah. And I do wonder, as I'm sort of looking around and looking for more models of, what's next and how we develop better teams and better companies that people want to be part of. How do I not become the asshole that I see out there now, right?
The mere fact that you're thinking about it means you're not going to become an asshole.
I don't know.
The fact that you're cognizant about it means that if you do screw up, you're going to be aware of it.
So I guess I got to have an accountability partner. You guys are going to call me on the carpet and go, Brigitte.
If you're working with people that can call you, I think if you're working with people you respect and you respect their opinion, even when they disagree with you,
right?
There'll always be that. I mean, that's the wisdom of the crowds. There'll always be that moderating force. You may not take their advice, but it impacts what you think is a norm.
Right.
So it's interesting. So it's kind of interesting. Maybe it's not interesting. So we're starting to pull data, Indiana University, and trying to figure out what's going on with students in terms of students on campus and things like that. And it's COVID. What the initial data is showing that basically COVID broke that last little link between social life and academic life.
Mhm.
Because when academic went to online, it was just online. Academics are academics. Well, that's hurt brands like Indiana University, where kids show up and are like, if I don't have a social life, it's just academics. Why don't I just go online?
Yeah.
Like, why shouldn't I? Why should I suffer in this dorm?
Right.
Right? Suffer through this weather because the social life has been peeled off of it. But that effect is then people have been polarizing because since they don't have that common social life, right? If all the freshmen showing up at IU at Bloomington socialized together and they had a social norm, right, that would also go to their parents on some level, and people would moderate based on what that social norm is. They don't have that anymore,
Right.
which is allow the students to polarize, it allows the parents to polarize, it allows people to become very disassociated as opposed to pulling them back. That if kids had a campus norm, that would also affect the parents. If you
Right.
did that at high schools, that would affect the number of problems school boards are having.
Yeah. I think it's sort of interesting because you have, like you said, the polarization view also is that I can't be called out, right? Like you said, as long as you have somebody do it. There was an interesting experiment one of my founders and I were running early on around innovation teams, and one of the things we sort of put in there was the ability for the model to give you feedback. And I do science fiction writing, and feedback is really hard on a good day. And if you giving feedback to somebody's baby science fiction novel is really, really hard. So I learned, we had a lot of discussions on it. And I was fascinated by what we were able to create because we sort of had an interesting triad. The feedback that we got for each person was like short 3 things. It was valuable, it was insightful, and it was kind. It was, and not like, it said like, hey, if you would have thought about if you did well on these 4 things, if you would have entered in this part of the negotiation a little bit earlier, you would have gotten the following 7 aspects, back from your partner probably better. And I thought it's interesting that we were able to get an AI model to do it. Now it was sort of easier because it was on a negotiation, but getting people to understand, take, and give criticism is a really hard talent.
Yeah, which is why it's your company. The fact that you already have a core group that respects each other and can reach, you have a company consensus.
Yeah.
On some level, right? There is going to be one. At which point you'll never polarize off of that on some level. You might disagree with it. You might pull the consensus in a different direction. You might disagree, but never to the extent that you're seeing.
Yeah. Chuck?
Yeah, I think that, that's all well and good when you have the team in place, but if you're a growing organization like it is there, how do you attract new people? And how do you get them to understand that? I think I heard that the difference between process and culture, the process is the way things are done. Culture is the way we do things here. And until you get somebody that can agree with, yeah, I think I can fit within that culture because I understand the work ahead, but I also understand how it is that I need to interact with the team, to make the team high performance, and I would sort of go back to this. So this is a process question, this is a culture question,
right?
And how do I fit in there? But when you're trying to attract talent to that group, I guess the bigger question is, what kind of questions do you ask?
Yeah.
I'll just call it the interview process for shorthand, but when I'm trying to add people to my team, are they a fit in that regard? And that to me, and getting back to your point, John, is that's where Gen Z falls down because they don't have that collective experience. And you can look back at places like the Marines and my father and everybody that had to serve 2 years, right? They didn't particularly care for it, but they all coalesced around the fact that, listen, this is we are in the suck, but we can all agree that our drill instructor is the worst. Right? Like we can all coalesce around that idea. So
right.
Whatever that idea is within this company, it's like, yeah, listen, I don't like the fact that I have to fill out forms in triplicate and press hard 5 copies, this, that, and the other.
Right.
But we're all going through it, and I can work with that process because the culture will enable me to let me be me,
Right.
within this group and perform at a high level.
Right. And I think that's interesting. One of the things I'm sort of playing with is, and I'm seeing this emerge, is more and more people, it's like doing a try before you buy on both sides, where you're like, hey, let's do like a 1099 relationship for, you know, a couple of projects or something like that. See if you enjoy doing this or not.
Yeah.
But that's also a very sort of different group sometimes.
Well, it's
What we did
interesting
when
that
we
you
hired
bring that
Jen,
up,
we did
you know,
that.
because, you know, in let's just say the New York Fire Department, NYFD, there's a whole group of people they call probies, which are probational,
Right.
which is, you know, that's sort of the try and buy. Do you, again, here's the process how to put out a fire, but this is how we approach it. Like when the siren goes off, who's doing what and how are they doing it? And, you know, I know this guy's supposed to be on the hose, but he can't lift more than 25 pounds. Like, how the hell's he going to hold this thing? The culture says, listen, I will pick up that slack for you. I will grab the hose. You go turn the thing on the fire hydrant and we'll get this thing out. Right.
Right.
But everybody's supposed to be able to do all of the things. And again, if you can't, we figure out a way to do that. But there's a very specific probationary period where, is this guy going to work? And again, it's life or death in a lot of those situations. Right. So you need to know whether this is going to be reliable and whether they're going to answer the siren and do the things that's necessary, to accomplish the mission, but also are they going to get killed in the process? And then, that's a weeding out process. But there is an actual process in that regard, like for me to say 1099s or whatever.
Right.
So that could be a model to study, to say, listen, we're going to, and it's an analogy, right? You can point to that and go, you know, we've all seen the cop shows, we've all seen the things, and you know, we know how. I don't know, I forget what movie it was, Backdraft or something like that. But you know, the cops needed to go investigate how things. You know, there was a death, there was a murder. You know, it was arson to cover up. You know, who has control over the scene at this time, and before you hand it off to one or the other, certain things in the process have to take place.
Right.
You know, that could be an analogy to use if you're looking to hire, you're looking to put together a high performance team.
Right.
And I think, John, that gets to your point about, you know, how do you incorporate neurodivergent people, and then back to your point about Indiana and students and things like that. Until you go through something together, it's tough to make that assessment. But if everybody understands that it's tough to make the assessment, and you're in that assessment part of the process, you can work through it. Seems to me.
Yeah. John, you want to add something to that too?
No, because I forgot that when we hired Jen, we did the 1099. She was a 1099 for 3 months, and then it was do you want to join, kind of as a early late co-founder, whatever. And so we had our requests upon her, but she also had her requests back on us.
Oh, interesting.
I will work with you, but these are the issues that are important to me. How are you addressing those?
Interesting. I like that she had the courage to say it, because not very many people do. They just like, where do I sign?
Yeah, right. So it was like, okay, so it's important that we do X, Y. Okay, we agree with it. Let's document it and let's actually put it in place and live with it.
And going back to the Chuck's thing on the probationary thing, I'm seeing this with a person I know right now, and part of their early job was they had to go up to the location, the battle lab in the middle of nowhere, and sort of spend like just an inordinate number of hours sort of being part of that. And I thought this person would be just like, hate this. And the person was like, no, I love it. And I love being part of this. And I really feel like I'm part of the team. And it would be like, you know, like your first fire is in like -40 degrees. Right. And it's astonishing to see what happens when people are encompassed in a climate of, you know, I want to say extremes, but, you know, really having to get down into that nitty gritty hard part.
So maybe that's what the government needs with the Gen Zs and their clearance issues and everything else. They need a training lab. They need a faux, right? Something that's really doesn't need to be classified, but pretend to classified, and they go and they experience life for 3 months, 6 months.
So when I was in DEA and I was a chemist, and so chemists get the great job of cleaning up the clandestine labs, the meth labs. and we were down in Quantico, and you have to wear all your SCBA gear, and it's like, I don't know, 90 degrees, and I'm in a Tyvek suit with like 30 pounds of gear, and I'm hating every moment of it. But there was a really interesting project we had to do, and you had to go in. It was a building, a burning building, basically. It was full of smoke, and the lights were out, and you had a team of 3. It was you and 2 other people, and you had like sort of find your way through and lead your team out. And one of the guys goes, you're the middle person, that like not the shortest. He said you should go first. He goes, close your guys' eyes and you do it that way, and you'll get through it. And that was one of the most things I remember from it. Not because it was super, edgy. It was because it was the little things that the guy that had the most experience told us that got us through really fast, and taught me a lot about trusting the rest of the people on my team. So. But it was something I would have never known unless I was, like you said, like the Gen Z, there and sort of, sweating my ass off. So
Government has plenty of places they could send these little Gen Zs for 3 months.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. So now I was like, what would that look like? We should have like a cyber group like that has to also go out and do like tree stuff and like mix it all up with and we could have a ton of fun with this.
See, they got that little town there. That's like that self-whatever town that has like everything in it. Stick them there.
Yeah.
Populate it with some people.
Right. See what happens.
Yeah, just keep it so that it's low threats of stuff actually gets out, but they think it's
right.
Right.
So when I was working years ago, and I know somebody started calling me and they said, Brigida, why am I getting all these emails from Princess Poopy Pants? And I was like, I don't know, because these are all your emails and they're all coming from Princess Poopy Pants. Well, it turned out my 5-year-old had learned how to hack my phone. And so she had turned all my emails into Princess Poopy Pants. And then on my text, she made them all opposite. So anytime I said yes, it said no. And it wasn't so much I gave her an environment, but she had watched my fingers to do the numbers. And somewhere between then and 15, she's lost that. I mean, maybe that's a good thing. That dynamicism about exploring ideas and exploring some of these things. And I wonder what environment we could give to more people to do those kinds of Princess Poopy Pants moments that both made me really proud of her and really pissed me off.
Camp. Send them on a camp.
So I will send them to Battle Lab because it's 1,400 acres in the middle of nowhere, and I'm sure we can have a lot of fun. But so now what I need from you guys is to have like a whole bunch of different activities that I drop them into.
I see. I think what you do is you pull. Well, the stuff I'm thinking about, like some of the wargaming and some of the online stuff, they're perfect fodder for that. They're perfect to create noise. They could be participating as just data creators and crap, and yet think they're actually doing something else.
Yeah, we can have a ton of fun with it.
I don't know. They get to see what the world's really like, and they know whether they want to sit through the.
Hey, Kevin. So we're just actually wrapping up a little bit, but I would like you guys to meet Kevin. And Kevin, we have something new named Chuck, and you already know John.
Yeah, I know John. Yeah. So, okay, Chuck. Good to meet you. Sorry, I was in a meeting.
Kevin.
So, could you introduce yourself real quick? Because we have some.
I gotta pop off.
All right, I'll see you later, John. All right, thank you. All right, bye. But Kevin, I would like you to meet Chuck because I think you guys may have some interests that are relative. Then we'll catch up some more next month when we talk about corporate zombies. So
Yeah.
Chuck, when you start, and then Kevin.
Sure thing, Kevin. Nice to see you. I'm actually in a car, so there's no lighting, so that's why I'm off camera at the moment. But I had a chance to meet Brigida on a walk that I took, and happened to take me past her property where the trail that I was on backs up to her property, and I stopped her in her gardening, and she assured me that she was no gardener. It's just a way for her to get out of the house.
Yep.
So none of the things that she was growing is she going to eat, according to her. And she
Task
said, "Hey, I'll
avoidance.
just send you a
Yeah.
text." Yeah, exactly.
Avoidance
I'll
behavior.
let
Yeah.
you know when this stuff is ready to go. I work for a small firm. We're an IT services firm. It's an easy way to think about that. There's sort of three core services that I have. One is in the contingent labor. So if you have a program that you're looking to control your fixed labor costs, but you need a number of programmers, data analysts, and things like that to get the job done, we can help you fix your costs and find the right talent. Our
Source
sort of secret
identity.
sauce in that regard, yes, exactly right, is to find the proper cultural fit, including I know this language, I know that language, I know how those two languages interact and everything else, but
Yeah.
we try to make sure that it's a culture fit as well, because the last thing you need is a false start, right? People invest time and effort and money and things like that. And right before you joined, we were talking about, as part of the conversation, was how do you incorporate those people into your culture? And that's kind of the things. And then it's
can you
simple things
actually?
like
Can you, right? I mean, is it possible? Right.
exactly. And so we're sort of I don't call us the arbiters, but we say, yeah, I know this group and I know you a little bit, and I don't think it's a great fit. Or like, when can we start? Like, let's get you on this project right now because I think it's going to be a roaring success. So that's one of the lines of business. And the other ones are
So a
very simple,
matchmaker,
right?
basically, right? Matchmaker.
Yeah, exactly. And then is it on site? Is it remote? What kind of skills? What kind of hard skills do you have? Right, that's the stuff that shows up on
why
paper.
would it not
but
be
the soft
remote,
skills,
right? I mean,
exactly.
why would it not be remote, right? So if it's classified work, that's one reason, right? But other than that, why?
Yeah, exactly. And that can also solve some of the culture issues, right? If you're remote, you just show up and show your work remotely, and you don't have to be in a meeting where you like to doodle or tap your Bic pen 50 times. It drives everybody nuts. You just produce what it is that you did. And then some of the other lines of business that we have are basic, right? You need a new Cisco server, and how does this firewall interact with this switch and things like that. So we have that kind of skill too. But the more fun and interesting part is the thing that I just described, is trying to put teams together on behalf of companies that will pay you money to do it, and we like it.
So if you're doing the how to configure a firewall and how to architect your network thing, then you're dealing with people who don't know what they're doing, right?
Well, it's either they don't really know what they're doing, but they know they need protection. They know they need, they hear the buzzword, and I call them buzzwords, but they hear the acronyms, right? Zero Trust Network Architecture or access. I'm sorry. Yeah, exactly. And so you can start with, depending on who it is that you're speaking with, right? And that's another skill set. It's like, listen, I'm talking to a CIO. He's got 30 years in the business. I'm not going to tell them anything that they probably don't know, except for whatever new thing the partner that we have is introducing that they might not know all that much about. And I'm always reminded of a line that I heard. It's like, yeah, you can always tell a Harvard man, but you can't tell him much. So you have to figure out what it is that you can suggest, or what it is you can say, look, this is exactly how things are happening, and we think this is a good idea for you. So you're spot on, Kevin.
Or no news stupid, right? So how to avoid some of the lunacy in the executive orders and stuff like that, rocket ship to Mars by Friday, not ever happening. SBOM, impossible, give up on it. Don't even bother wasting your time.
It's funny. I always like to challenge people that, Kevin. It's like, well, look, we need this by Friday. So, all right, well, why not Thursday? Why can't we do it Thursday then? And they're like, oh, well, we can't do it because this, that, and the other thing. I said, well, that's the exact reason we can't do it Friday.
That's true.
How about Friday a year
throw
from
it back
now,
on them, right?
right?
So okay.
Exactly.
If
I can't do it Friday. Oh, great. Have it
Monday. What bad would happen between Friday and Monday?
Yeah, exactly.
And then they go, well, I can't explain that. Then why do you need it by Friday? It's just any pattern that exists everywhere. Yeah, I mean, it's just so a little bit, just a little set here. Background: I went the Air Force Academy, did 21 years in the Army infantry. Retired and became a defense contractor. Followed my Army wife around. Her career was doing better than mine, and then became a GS-15 DoD civilian in the DoD CIO shop. did that for about 7 years, and I retired, and now I'm at a think tank, one of the FFRDCs called Institute for Defense Analyses. So I've done IT, manpower, contracting, program management, a lot of the stuff in the building, Pentagon. And, at the top of the food chain where you see anti-patterns all over the place, and one or two ways to get to yes. And so that's kind of, when I come to these things, I'm the red team kind of, sort of. I try not to make it too bad, but it's like, no, that's not going to work. Here's why. And you just see this all, it's just, after a while, just the patterns emerge, and you can just see, that might work if you get lucky and the timing's right, or it might not work. And then Brigade always gets a really interesting group of people here. Everybody doesn't show all the time. I have to come late because I have another meeting that conflicts. But I find it interesting. There's a Monday evening innovation thing in DoD that a guy named Graham Plaster.
Yeah, I know Graham very well.
Yeah. Well, we went the last face-to-face down there that I sponsored at the Brass Rabbit.
Oh, I was there.
Yeah. And Scott's, her husband, went to the Air Force Academy much later than me. So we always have an interesting conversation about the Academy when we get together. And then John, who dropped off, has an interesting story to tell. I don't know if he did it tonight, but he was a lawyer and then got in a little public spat with somebody and kind of got squashed. And now he's trying to sell stuff to DoD, which is a waste of time, sell it to the commercial sector, and make money. So I've been trying real hard to sell it to DoD, which is like, dude.
Yeah.
Go make some money on the
I guess
commercial
it depends
side.
on what it
And
is
then
that
when
he's
you
trying to
made the
sell to
money,
DoD,
then you
right?
have the luxury of trying to sell it to DoD. But trying to sell to DoD as your primary source of funding is crazy.
Yeah.
I think also a lot of his models break their comfort zone.
Oh yeah, no. So he's way outside the box. So it hurts people's heads, and they don't know enough about the technology to understand what he's doing. It looks like black magic, so they don't trust it, even if it works. And then you're dealing with people who want, $10 a product for $2.
Right.
So it's just why don't sell it to DoD, sell it to companies that are worried about economic collapse in country A, B, or C, or regime change that's going to affect their factory there, and they're going to have to close the factory and move. So, go sell commercial.
My son just took a job with a company called Water Plan, and it's a startup. I forget what series they're in or whatever it is, but it's consulting with companies specifically around their water usage in the various countries that they do business. I mean, an easy one to think of would be like Coca-Cola, right? Where am I going to get my water to, or what do I use water for, right? And the easy one is, I just take it right out of this spring that I bought the rights to, stick it in a bottle and sell it as Dasani, or, I run a CNC factory and, I'm manufacturing stuff and I need a constant stream of water to clear out the shavings and stuff like that. Where am I going to get that? How long do I think that supply could last? And so they do consulting around that kind of a thing. But you're absolutely right. It's almost a capacity.
So Israeli kept the Golan Heights exactly because of water.
Yep.
It's all about water. Right?
Yeah, it always is.
It's not defense, right? It's all about water. So the Golan Heights gives them access to water, and they're never going to give it up.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me too. You think about the government and people politicize climate change and climate, this, that, and the other thing, and then you take this little boat tour of Newport News and the Norfolk base down there and everything else, and they're already thinking about how in the hell are we going to move all of this stuff when the seas rise by 3 inches, because none of this stuff is going to be here, and they got to be thinking about that way in advance. So
what do you know about Wall Street? Right.
Yep.
Right. So, New York City has got that problem. Boston has that problem, right? Basically, every major port on the East Coast has that problem. Miami, right? Limestone-based water. More the sea rises, Miami falls into the ocean.
Yeah. And they're going to get a lot of it here in the next couple of days.
Well, we have a house in Nags Head on the Outer Banks. I'm keeping my eye on this because at some point, we're going to need to sell it before it's underwater. We need to sell it before everybody understands it's going to be underwater, so we get somebody to buy it, who then eats the fact that it's going to be underwater.
Mm-hmm.
So there's two things I think of. One is Venice, right? Number two is they're having the same types of issues in California with the mudslides. And people have no more land to build their house on, but they still owe for the house that's now gone.
Yeah. So this is like, it's all location, and there's lots of things factored into location, not just the school district. It's, are you susceptible to it being flooded? Are you susceptible to being part of a mudslide when you have a torrential rain that's, 100-year event? And, most of the people don't have the means to have options. They're kind of stuck where they're at.
Right.
And so, stuff happens. Because if you sell your house, you got to buy another one someplace else. And where the housing prices are going, it's like crazy. Like here in Northern Virginia, you sell your house that you bought for $700,000 for $1.1 million, but then where are you going to go?
Nags Head.
Well, there's that. Yeah. Or someplace else. But if you want a relo in Northern Virginia, that 1.1 ain't going very far.
No, but it wasn't until I think 2 years ago where the government started to say, if you live in a flood zone and your house floods, we don't pay you to rebuild there.
No, I'm not rewarding stupid, right?
Not long though, because I have a cousin that lives out in Front Royal and his house has been flooded twice and rebuilt twice. Why?
If you build on the Mississippi floodplain and you get flooded, why should we pay you to rebuild your house that's going to get flooded again in 1 or 2 years and over and over and over again? Sorry, no. Turn it into bottomland, plant tobacco or whatever the hell you want to plant, but you're not your house.
Right. But it wasn't until recently that policy was actually enacted, which sort of blew my mind. So, but going back to water rights, did you know that one of the biggest areas VCs are and other investors are buying up now are the water rights out in the western states?
It does not surprise me because there's a shortage of water, right? The Colorado River is like it, and there's not enough of it. And if you look at the Lake Mead, we're out there about, was it 2 or 3 years ago? You take a picture and you can see where the water table used to be, and then
the dead bodies
50, 60 feet down, they're finding all the oil drums with dead bodies in them that the mob pushed in there because there's no water left. Because they're not getting the rainfall, they're not getting the snowfall, and they're not getting the melt off, and so Lake Mead is like non-existent.
So how
there's no flow to the Colorado River, which means when you get to LA, there ain't much left.
Yeah, but for all the data centers that are going in around there, how are they going to have cooling, or is it going to become so absorbent that you can't?
So I asked when I work at IDA, Institute for Analysis, so I have a guy's one of the deputy directors, a microelectronics expert. So, we're making this deal with TSMC and we're going to build a plant in Phoenix. And I asked him, so chip factories need to ship a lot of water, scientific term. And why would you put a frickin' factory in Phoenix where there's no freaking water instead of in Iowa next to the Mississippi River where there's a ton of water, right? And the answer was, because all the people who do chip design go to Arizona State. That's the place where the center of excellence for all the people who know how to build chips is in Arizona. And they're not moving to Iowa. So you're bringing them mountain to Mohammed, even though it doesn't make a lot of sense, and trucking in water like they do in Taiwan.
In India, too.
I don't know about India, but I know about Taiwan, but so yeah, I mean, you're putting it in a suboptimal geographic location because of the talent pool that has the knowledge to work on it. It's like, okay, I asked him and he went back, did a little work, came back and told me the answer. I went, okay, that's weird, but it makes sense. Right. So IDA has, we do a bunch of work for NSA. We have 2 centers, one's in Princeton, one's in La Jolla. Why do we have one in La Jolla? because there are mathematicians on the West Coast who will not move to the East Coast.
That's where the Jasons have all their stuff too.
So we created a center in La Jolla because there's Caltech type mathematicians who ain't
Right.
moving from California to Princeton, and that's why we did it. So it's all about human capital, basically, and you bring the mountain to Muhammad, not the other way around, because you need the talent. Now with remote work, that changes depending on what classification layer work at. Cryptography is not get done remotely, so you have to go to the office and sit in the skiff and do that stuff. And it limits your stuff. Now I was talking to a guy who's gotten a bunch of space stuff here at IDA, and so it's all sapped up. So he has to go to the office and sit in the skiff all day, every day, because you can't do anything because of the classification layer. So that for some people, that's a I'm not doing that kind of job. Just sorry, I'm out. Right. And I'm on a task for the National Nuclear Security Agency where we talk to them about, if you can't get to remote classified work, you won't have a workforce.
But we were talking about this earlier, Amazon and Google have moved away from, remote work. So then are we going to be able to recruit those people over if we have enough remote work for them?
If you're not willing to do remote work, you will not get the younger workforce.
Yeah.
All right. People my age, we're going to suck it up and do it because we're used to it. But the young folks, if they can't do it from home and on their phone, they'll find something else to do.
Chuck, this is your expertise space. What are you seeing in your demographics?
It's interesting because we'll see certain requisitions for IT talent, and that's the first thing we look for is whether or not it's remote. Because if it isn't remote, then that limits the really the geographic radius from which we can try to find people. If they say, "Listen, you need to be in Harrisburg," then we say, "Okay, well, we can go as far as whatever a 40-mile commute is." And that's the talent pool that you have to have, unless they're willing to move, which, no one's going to move to go be a .NET programmer.
So if I'm in a low-cost area, why would I move to a high-cost area to net less money? I mean, hello.
Yeah, exactly. Some of that comes down to control, managerial control. Like I want to see the people. I want to be sure that I can see their fingers clicking on the keyboard. And it doesn't matter if they're, solving their, 65th Wordle in a row. As long as I see them there, and I have the management. They're in the chair. They're not out getting a coffee. I'm doing a good job of managing, and it's crazy to think that way, especially when you can produce the work in half the time. And there's been stories about people who are so bright, and the work that they were hired to do is so mundane that they're doing 3 jobs at the same time because they.
They're actually getting paid 3 times because they're time splitting, right? And because they can, right? And they're productive and they get it done.
Right.
And so I remember it's really called Raven Rock, which is like think Cheyenne Mountain East. It's a nuclear command and control facility up on the Maryland-Pennsylvania border. And they wanted us to do an independent assessment of that. So I went up there and so we go in the ops center for the security folks. All right. Hundreds of monitors, they're all watching Netflix.
Yep.
Right. They got the security cameras up, but there's nothing going on security. So they're watching Netflix or Talk TV or whatever. They got 7 different tiles on their screen, their big monitor, and 6 of them are not security. They're something else.
Right.
All right. And we're talking to the boss, and there are all 4 or 5 of them in there. It's like, this is SOP. So it's like, okay, you're getting paid to do nothing.
Right.
Good gig if you can get it. If you don't mind sitting inside basically a mountain, right? All day, every day.
Exactly. I saw something on the on the social media again. A Gen Z person was like, "Oh yeah, good luck getting AI to replace my job. Who are they going to get that needs 4 hours to manage their fantasy football team before my 2:00 meeting? They're never going to find that person."
Yeah. Well, I work from home as much as I can, and I'm sitting in meetings, and I'm generally playing Sudoku, because there's zero information content in a meeting, but I have to be there,
Mhm.
right? So I have to engage. Every third minute I have to actually pay attention for a little bit, but then the rest of the time is downtime because blah 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 blah. Ginger, Mary
Right.
Ann,
Yeah.
and so but you're paying me. Right. So
Right.
it's a billable hour. So, okay, but I'm not wasting my time doing nothing. I'm going to do something that keeps me intellectually engaged.
Yeah. Kevin, have you heard Brigida's thoughts on that and trying to create a different evaluation model for people based on what it is that they actually contribute to a meeting or a
So
product
I would-
or an end result?
I'd be fascinated to hear how you would do metrics on that. I mean, because hell if I know.
So we are actually looking at when we started this, we said, I just want to work with the person that I like from this latest red team. And that person happens to be the foremost expert in like some esoteric whatever and the head of a large group. And they were like, yeah, I got other shit to do. I like doing this 8 hours a month. So if you can figure that out, I'll do that. And so I said, when I was ISB, I could pay them $1,000 a month and they got to go talk to the DNI, or $1,000 a day. And they were like, fine, I'll forego my $5,000 an hour if I get to go talk to DNI, right? And I said, what if there's a way I can actually figure out what each person brings to a room when it regards to innovation or a new idea, whether that person builds on the idea, brings the room together like Counselor Troy, or builds out that program into a larger area. And we can split that into different of crypto, right? And I can actually align it to my patent licensing, and I can have you get residuals. And that's our goal, is changing the entire, I want to say gig economy, but the way that you are valued, not just for being the idea maven, but for being the person who can bring the people together, the person who understands how to ask the person in the back of the room that hasn't said anything about their opinion on this and the value of that. And that's what I want to do.
And to bring out that opinion, that's a soft skill, right? How do you get someone to come forth with an idea that they have that they might, you hear about this again in the general terms of, men in meetings get to talk 50% more than women. And right now it's a 63%. Exactly right. But then I think of, a movie like Good Will Hunting, and that scene where, Matt Damon is taking that mathematical proof that took Skarsgård, months to put together. And he waves the paper around. He said, do you know how fucking easy this is for me? Do you know how easy this is?
Right.
And he sets fire to the thing. And the guy's like, oh my God. So how do you get, how do you reward a guy like Matt Damon who can do that in 3 minutes and make that contribution to someone who's going to take a month to do it?
The bureaucratic problem is people don't like that.
Right.
Right. They will throw you out of the room because you made them look bad. Right?
Yeah.
So
that's
the
another
art
soft
form
skill,
is
right?
how do you nudge the person who is, I won't say clueless, but not fully knowledgeable in the right general direction. And that's a EQ and not an IQ thing, it's an EQ thing, right?
Right.
Read the person about how do I get this person to not go down stupid street,
right?
To get on might get there street.
Right.
So I've had this experience. I sitting in a room at my my think tank, and there's 8 people in the room, 6 of which had PhDs.
Of course.
And we needed to do a slide deck on how to do an acquisition using a new acquisition vehicle. And I was part-time on this thing. It wasn't my project. And I'm sitting there going, everybody's like blowing on the BB in the middle of the table because nobody wants to do it. And I said, screw it, I'll do it.
Right.
Because it required knowledge of contracting and knowledge of program management and knowledge of a bunch of different domains. And I happen to have that because of my weird career. So I got back to my office. It took about 30 minutes, right, to do it. And I waited 4 hours and then I sent it. I built 4. And you think I'd invented fire.
That's okay.
And this is a bunch of really smart people, but they just hadn't had the domain knowledge to figure out that given the way the world works, here's how the Army's going to try and do this, and it's going to screw up and step on his foot and and then, but you have to package it so you can sell it, so it can be sold to the person you're selling it to, as received wisdom and not hurt their head. Because if
Right.
you hurt their head, then it's dead.
I think there's also the idea that like somehow my effort is worth less because I didn't work 8 hours on it. And I think this is where they talk about, the expert and the master versus the beginner, right?
Right.
What do you bring to a room? And I think some of it as we have to get off our high horse about my stuff being worth more than yours because I sat at a desk for 14 hours and you sat and thought for 14 minutes.
Who got the right answer quickest?
Right.
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 But I had to learn, when I went back to being basically a contractor again, not being a govie, there's no reward for being quick.
Right.
Right. There's no, you actually undercut your value if you're quick because it
Right.
looks like you made it look too easy. You embarrass other people. And so I had to all right, I did it in 30 minutes. I'm waiting until 4:30 to hit send on the email. So it looks
Right.
like it took me 4 hours. So I don't make everybody else feel bad.
Yeah, but
That's better than what the 8 to 24 hours it would take somebody else to have done the same thing because they don't have the knowledge base, right? And it would have come out half as well. But that you have to be careful with that, right? So
I agree.
Because
one of the things that I try to teach my children, is oh my God, I'm only getting things like that. And I said, listen, you're not getting paid for the hour. You're getting for the value that you bring to the hour. So you can actually create more value in that hour than somebody else, or you can then be confident in asking either A, for more responsibility or more money.
Right.
Like, look, I had the same hour as that other person, and here's the extra value that I brought to that hour because I did this, that, and the other thing in less time.
Right.
I shouldn't be measured in the same way.
Right. But you have to be careful because you embarrass people. If you embarrass people, it rebounds.
Yeah.
It rebounds big time.
And I completely agree with that. Yeah.
The other thing is, do we select out?
Again, that's a soft skill, and that comes down to management, I think. Doesn't what you think, Kevin? I mean, if you get a good manager, a good manager will understand, like, listen, I'm not threatened by you.
Right.
So
Because we had a conversation 6 months ago where you don't want my job, so I'm not worried about you taking my job.
Right.
It's pretty
I
clear.
tell new hires at IDA that a good boss is worth $15,000. A good boss is worth at least $15,000
Right.
in salary. Somebody's going to cover your butt, take care of you, groom you, mature you. That's worth at least $15,000 in salary. So before you leave here and go to Booz Allen for another $15,000, think that through.
Right.
Because a bad boss is just, it's just awful, right? I mean, Scott's going through that, but I mean, the bad boss is just toxic.
Right. Well, he actually left that group.
Oh, he did? Okay.
Yeah, he did. I was telling Chuck, I said after investigation number 8, I was apoplectic. And I was like, I can't take this anymore, what's going on. But it's interesting to see when, I don't know if you guys have read Andreessen's book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things.
No, I haven't.
It's sort of old. And he talks about one of the best coders he ever had. And this guy would finish stuff that took everybody else 3 months in 3 days. And he said he was fucking awesome. Except after a month, he just fell off and found out, and then they would call him and they're trying to figure out. And 2 months later, they found out he had a huge cocaine problem and bipolar. And, there were just so many issues trying to get him to come back to work that the bureaucracy said, you have to let him go. And Andreessen said, I let him go. He goes, but if I had the opportunity, I would hire him right back. Because for all his issues, I'm okay with him only working 1 month because he got so much done in that 1 month.
So when you need something really important done quickly, that's a pearl of great price, right?
Right.
If you want a bunch of, churning worms to crank poop sheets by the pound that nobody cares about, that's a whole nother thing. So when you want something done right quick, then those weird personalities are what you need.
Right.
Because they get locked in, they're autistic, they're somewhere on the spectrum, and they get locked in, and they're, bipolar and manic depressive, and they get on the manic phrase, and they get shit done in a day that would take a team of people a week or a month, right? Now, you can't wheel them out of the garage all that often. You got to pick your shot, but they're worth having around. And a lot of managers don't realize that. They want slow and steady wins the race.
Mhm.
But when you really, Rick Rover has this great testimony before Congress about the myth that, if you can manage anything. And he says, no, technical problems require technical knowledge, right? And not management skills. You got to know the tech,
Mhm.
and you got to skull the tech, and otherwise you get crap. But we have this belief that management is management. You've got an MBA. You can manage everything from national defense to nuclear weapons. No,
Right.
wrong, right? Why do we have nuclear submarines? Because Rickover was in charge, and he was technical, and he only hired people who were technical, and he
Oh, we just
was
lost him.
brutal about hiring, about who was
Right.
allowed to come in and who was not allowed to come in, and that's
Right.
why we have a nuclear navy, right? With no accents, and with this belief that magically generic management skills will get you through is just bullshit.
Well, and I think that the thing that I'm seeing now too is we talk about having a learning organization, but then we don't give people the time.
Right. You don't send them off to school, right? You
Right.
won't let them. They're constantly, urgent,
Right.
and the urgent, but no, not urgent, but important stuff never gets done because you won't
Right.
take the people out of the link, send them off to school. So when you have that need a year from now, they're there to do it, and
Right.
that's just penny wise and pound foolish. But
Right.
it's a constant pattern you see all over the place.
Right.
Won't
And then
invest.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I was sort of joking about recently because I had left my organization that I was working with in McLean, and I was consulting there, and they're like, I said, I'm going to go do halftime, and I'm going to go to MBA school, and they're like, well, don't you get time off? I was like, no, I have to do a day job, and then this, it's not like you guys.
Getting your MBA at night, yeah, right.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was joking with somebody that when I came back and I had these new skills and I went to my management and said, hey, I've got these new skills, they're like, okay. I was like,
right? Whoop-de-dip, yeah.
Right. And then I was going to leave, and then I got a new project, which was like having my residency in MBA school for global manufacturing. And I was like, I'll just do this. I'm going to go totally native and only do the government side. I came back to my company and said, I know how to do this. I know how to get us over the technology transition of death. I got 77 projects there. This is how you do it. And they're like, we don't care. I said, cool beans. I'm going to go make a company on that. Yeah. But it's really fascinating how when you break out of a mold, instead of them seeing as like, what can we do with this, right? How can we sell into it? They're like, you don't fit here. I don't know.
You're not part of our predetermined organizational culture.
Right. Even though it's dying. Like our whole business is dying.
Yeah, we're not making, you're an outlier.
Right.
But the digital camera got invented at Kodak.
Right.
Right. It's exactly the same thing, right?
Right.
You are not fitting the mold.
Right.
You might save them, but we're not willing to go there because it's not the way we do things.
Right.
Right. So it's like Xerox.
Right.
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 It's just maddening. It's like being a actually technically knowledgeable working breed in government. Mm-hmm. That's an anti-pattern, right? You're not allowed to do that.
Right.
I would sit in these meetings with these salespeople, and I was supposed to just believe their bullshit and sign off on the contract. I would throw the bullshit flag, and they would get really kind of aghast, like, you're not supposed to do that. That's not part of the game here, right? You're violating the rules. It's like, well, actually, I read the homework. I read the textbook. And your product, what you're telling me, violates the laws of physics. So can you explain a little bit there about this miracle occurs block on your flowchart? And,
but we have an algorithm. It's protected.
Well, get on, or be in a meeting. They had their, engineer on the phone who was another salesperson. Mm-hmm. And I'd ask a technical question that they couldn't answer.
Right.
It's like, you're not supposed to do that. That's not fair. No, this is a game. You're supposed to play the game of stupid govy, and you believe my bullshit, and then you sign a contract. It's like, no, sorry, not doing that. And so I embarrassed them. Kind of, I started to enjoy it. It was kind of fun.
But you've got to keep them on their toes. The thing is, though, it's when they send those same guys in and thinking they're going to just keep selling into you.
Right. Yeah.
It just blows my mind.
I'd go to the Forrester and Gartner conferences, and I'd just be blowing people up left and right. It's like bullshit. Right. Tell me what you're really doing. I was on a couple of phone calls, kind of the quasi red team, and I asked the guy running this. Guy claimed they were doing machine learning AI on all the IoT devices in the medical profession. I said, well, how would you do that? Because there's like, every day there's another 100, 150, right? So why would they be sending their machine to you to let you do pen testing on it to figure out the cybersecurity vulnerabilities? Because that would just be bad news, and they wouldn't do that. So I asked him about the F5 rate, which is a false positive versus false negative rate that you're machine learning and all about. Guy couldn't answer the question. So I'm going back to the other guy I'm on the phone with I was the red team, sending, this is bullshit, this is bullshit, this is bullshit, and they're just lying, flat out lying. I was surprised, I guess, naive me, that to the degree to which people just flat out lie.
So I remember calling somebody out on that one time in National Lab who had lied about what they'd done before and then resubmitted the same bullshit to do the next year. And I was
another grant proposal, right? Yeah.
Yes. And I remember calling them out and the PM getting sort of pissed. And I was like, you can't give them money.
It's total bullshit. I'm involved in a couple R&D projects at Army DevCom, and we assist them in the, RFI and then writing the BAA, and then we'll get the proposals, and then we'll rack and stack them and grade them, and then they will ignore us.
Right.
Technically knowledgeable people about what ones are actually good and which ones are bullshit, and they'll go through darts to the wall or something and pick ones that they like that bullshit acronym or whatever.
Right.
And then we kind of evaluate the performers as the things go along. It's like you picked all the wrong performers, so they're not getting anything done. Right. So, this is kind of a waste of time.
Right.
But
then they pick the same ones, and this is one of the things that my agency group was going with, and he said, even knowing you have a strong background, I have to put you through the BAA process right now, and they won't pick you because of the bullshit that it goes. He goes, so get a sole source vehicle and just, I'll pay for that, right? It's asinine.
No, it's stupid. So, what's interesting is also the ones that win have built once and have sold 5 times because they're good at proposals, right?
Right.
So they've sold this to 5 different places. It's the same slide deck. They changed the cover to put your name on it, but it's the same bullshit they've sold to 4 other people.
Right.
And they're getting paid 5 times to do the same thing that's generally going nowhere.
Well, it's because the win rate is so low now. I mean, it costs so much to do that. And the government's used to saying, like, I want to be the buyer, right? Wow.
I did some data mining on R&D contracts. So a distressingly large percentage of 6.1, which is basic research contracts, are won by Booz Allen Hamilton, who has 0 organic basic research capability. So they're hiring subs, they're putting the proposal together, they scrape off the pass-through, and the government deserves what happens. Right. It's just depressing. And 6.2 and 6.3 because they're good at proposals.
So we're having the same issue with our stuff right now, and they were like, well, you guys don't have a lab that we can go to. And I was like, bozo, the last one you paid for didn't either. They were just a bigger company, so they bullshitted you better. So how do we build the trust with companies like mine and Chuck's and others that we have the facilities and capacity that actually the bigs do? We just don't have the overhead.
I go back. This is a soapbox issue. So how do you get something done? People and money.
Right.
So it's HR and contracting. right? The two core processes that get you the people and the talent you need are contracting and HR. What are the two least appreciated lines of effort in DoD? Contracting and HR.
Right.
Time to hire is 240 days plus, depending on how you start to watch. Right. We don't write good contracts at all. We don't get the right people in the room to write the RFP and the source selection criteria. So you get bullshit. It ends up being LPTA, right? Whoever bids lowest with some bullshit, throws the most acronyms at it, and then you get nothing. Right.
Well, what was interesting, it was a DIA contract. They had done a few years ago, and they had picked this one contractor, and they were like, "We'll do incumbent capture. Don't worry." They then offered all these highly cleared people a 30% pay decrease, right? And guess what? None of them took it. So DIA got to recompete that contract 6 months later.
So I think the greatest example is SAF-AQ had a contract with, I think it was Leidos. The guy who ran the contract was at IDA with me. And they would come for contract renew. They wanted to bid about 1/3 of the value to get like 1/3 to 1/2. It was a ridiculous reduction in the amount. So the guy went and had a conversation with this SAF-AQ and said, "Listen, dude, you want retired 04s, 05s, 06s that have been contracting for 30 years to get this right. At that rate, we're going to get a retired E6.
Right.
You're crazy." And they pursued. So all the senior people left and found other jobs, and they got a bunch of retired E6s, and contract quality and SAF-AQ went in the toilet. It wasn't like they weren't warned. It was like, you got to pay market value for the talent. Or there's no free lunch here from fixed. No, you pay market value. You want the talent, you got to pay the people the money. And they went ahead and this is the acquisition part of the Air Force. So if anybody should know better about the realities of competition in the marketplace, it was them, and they went ahead and got on a stupid bus and drove it full speed ahead. Right. It's like, you can't make this stuff up.
What's incentivizing that? So if I have Chuck or myself or John or anybody like these groups that are doing different types of models than you guys are used to, why won't you hire these different models in? Is it because we don't fit within the BAA structure? Is it
so it's I would say, in my opinion, it's nobody ever got fired for buying IBM until IBM had tanked, right? It's the herd mentality, right? So there are some innovative KOs out there, but they're like unicorns,
right?
And as I told you, so I studied on years ago, the average KO is basically an E5.
Yeah.
GS9 with 5 years experience. You're not going to get, they're in a contracting organization that's optimized for avoiding protests or something else with a formulaic process that guarantees you can never get innovation.
Yep.
So, it's an uphill battle against the wind every step of the way. And then this assumes you have a knowledgeable mission sponsor on the back end who's trying to work through the jamming of the contracting organization to get you on board so that you can do the work for them.
Yeah, Kevin, if I could stop you there, one of the biggest hurdles, of course, then, because I have my salesperson's headset on, which is how do you identify those good contracting officers that do have some sort of innovation bent? And I think you were getting to that in saying that whoever owns the project, that person could identify who the best contracting officer is. And
well, so
is it like the judicial system where, okay, there's this case, and okay, what judge has the time and the clear docket to take this one, and you get the Mar-a-Lago papers in front of Eileen Cannon.
How do you steer to the right district court? That's the problem. So I will tell you, there's a lot of procedural barriers in place that limit the ability to do that. So, for example, if you're an OSC staff, you have to use WHS, Washington Court Services Acquisition Director. Now, you actually sneak around that, but it's hard. So now you're directed to Washington Headquarters Acquisition Directorate, and then you're stuck because you don't have an option on KO's shop, and they're optimized for no protest, and they don't care about your need for speed. and so you're screwed. I mean, I lived this personally for 7 years, so I mean, I'm talking from experience here. I actually went down and talked to my KO personally and the AKO. I had 3 contracts I needed, and I got exactly not what I asked for. I brought them cupcakes, I brought them coffee, I did everything I could, and I got exactly not what I asked for. All right.
So one of the things that I was joking with somebody about was we had that recently, and what happened was all my mission partners went to the essential, really good CO, and it worked really, really well. But as soon as that one person was gone, everything fell apart.
So it's all human geography, right? So this is the problem, right? It's about personal relationships and human geography. It's not generic. So you got to get somebody who trusts somebody and then make a deal, and you can get to yes. If one of those 2 people leaves, it's all over, right? So it's all timing. I used to tell people, it's all about having the crew, the boat, and the oars all down on the shore when the tide changes. But you can't afford to have the crew, the oars, and the boat all down on the shore all the time waiting for the tide to change. So this is actually luck, right? I mean, it really is to some degree luck and timing and, time of the year. And then with DOD, it's about what part of the administration, when's the money available. I mean, there's all these variables that make it extremely difficult. And then, like on that Monday night innovation call, most of those people don't understand the whole budgeting process and when money's available, and they are actually unarmed in a gunfight.
Well, right. The budget's been jacked with so much over the last few years with the CRs that.
Right. So CR means no new starts. So if you new start, you're not getting paid, right? And I had to tell somebody. So they were on an R&D contract, and they were counting on getting their R&D mod done by the end of fiscal year. And I said, well, sorry, dude, ain't happening. The KOs will run every O&M contract by the end of fiscal year because they get fired. And they will push your R&D mod off to after the end of the fiscal year when they got all the O&M ones done, and you might get something in place by Christmas.
Right.
And he didn't know that. It's like, well, I'm not trying to be Mr. Debbie Downer here, but I mean, that's just the reality. And then they're forward funded because the CR went through April, and then we finally got a appropriation. So then everybody had their money and tried to spend 2/3 of their money in the last 5 months of the fiscal year. So the KO shops get inundated.
Right.
They only done the O&M stuff because that gets them fired if they don't get it done because it goes back to the Treasury. And then the O&M stuff just pushed off to the right. Well, then you're forward funded on your O&M because most R&D contracts, you can't get the 2/3 obligated in the first year, so you don't get your money taken away. So they get their money scraped up the next year. It's just, it's.
So what do you think about the emergence of more and more OTAs? Everybody talks about having them, but nobody's willing to actually act on them.
But the problem is they're all going to the bigs. If you look at the data, right, it's going to booze and all the normal players. It's not going to small businesses.
Unless is that mainly because of risk reduction? Is that it? Is that just it? The risk,
part of it is
implied risk of doing business with a small.
No, so part of it is the bigs are good at proposals. They got the talent pool, they got a bench depth, and they write a really good proposal. I mean, I've been on source selection. It's hard to argue. Even when you know they can't do it, they wrote a really good proposal. The second part is the government does not put good source selection criteria to allow you to distinguish the bullshit from the not bullshit. So you're sitting there on source selection, either on technical or on price, and on technical, they didn't write the right stuff in there. So it's buzzword bingo, and everybody puts the same buzzwords in there. It comes down to lowest price, right? So you're not getting the technical screen out the bullshit. I've been on this a couple times now, and it's just, when you read a proposal, it's that they took their marketing brochure, they changed 2 words in it, and they sent it to you.
Right.
That's their proposal, right? There's no there.
Yeah.
Trying to convince your government sponsor that's bullshit is hard because they want comfort.
There's this fellow that I know who owns a company. He was involved with my kids' lacrosse, and McCarthy's his name, and he owns a company called Key Solutions. And their sort of a reason for existence is to help companies, small companies, write a kick-ass proposal. So and they're not cheap because they are really good, talented people, and they put together a terrific proposal. But even then, if you know how to write a proposal that was equal in quality as a document to a government agency, could that level? Are you saying that could level the playing field just because they're good at proposals?
So I will tell you that. So we've now done 2 rounds of screening BA applicants for Army DevCom, and we're pretty technical, right? We're a think tank. We've got some really deep knowledge, and we know what bullshit is and what's good. And we did a whole rack and stack evaluation of about 14 proposals, and we had a very clear 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And everybody else is in the don't bother. And we sent our evaluation off to our sponsor, and they dragged 2 people out of the don't bother crowd and put them in the top, which meant 2 people in the top were not selected for all sorts of weird reasons that are not explainable. You know, I don't know how you get past that, right? We had done our best job as technical experts to say, here's your 5 performers that can get something done and move the needle, and the rest of these aren't gonna. And they reached down and grabbed 2 at the bottom. So we funded some proposal for a couple students at GMU who had written something that only worked on C+, not C#, C+. But the sponsor had written code at some point in his life and he liked it. So they got picked as a performer. How do you explain that, right? There's no explaining that. It's with weather, right? I mean, climate's we hope for whatever we get, right? So it's lack of technical knowledge on the government side and other exogenous variables that you don't know about because you're outside the wire. Part of it's internal bureaucracy at DevCom about who swim lanes and who can do what and what magic words belong to which group, and you don't know that, right? So it's depressing because you know you got a solution. Well, so John was on. I mean, he has a solution that works.
Yeah,
but he can't get anybody to find it.
How about companies? Companies like Brigida's that are really doing leading edge type things and truly innovative things that you can feel and touch.
Don't do business with DoD.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I guess I would say this. There's only one group we can really do work with. That's SOCOM.
So they'll go out there. So I mean, SOCOM's they have their own acquisition authority. That people know what the hell they're doing. They got mission needs,
Right.
And they go get shit done. Right.
Right.
That's a total outlier in DoD.
Right.
I mean, total outlier, right? Or then you have the service equivalents, right? But they don't have acquisition authority, so it's a little bit different, right? But I mean, because they got to get stuff done, right? So the closer you get to the tip of the spear, the more you can cut through the bullshit. The further you get back towards the rear, the more the bullshit overwhelms things. So if you can get a deal with SOCOM, the problem with SOCOM is it's not a lot of money.
No, but my view is that I stay in the sub 10,000 range of products, and we're all about the refresh rate of new tech.
Right.
So when I talked to Peter Heineman, OSD R&E, he was like, that's where I need somebody to be. And I was like, I will own that then.
Yeah, Peter's a good guy. He leans forward and talks real softly across the table, so you have to listen to him.
Yes.
It's kind of a shtick. I met him at a data conference we were doing online, and I had never heard of the Heimler Catechism, so that turned that on to me. And then we interviewed him for another project about Jake, Joint AI Center. And he's being groomed to be somebody.
Well, he went through the IARPA chain, and now he's probably next up.
Yeah, he was a deputy at DARPA, and now he's over there and
a
CTO or something like that in R&E.
Right.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, so if you can plug in a guy like that who is technically knowledgeable, can see the bullshit, then you're great. But finding that person and getting them to get a meeting with you is
it's not easy.
Not simple.
And
Not
that's
simple.
The thing
Right?
is, just because I know Peter doesn't mean he's going to connect me up to this group. He was like, you need to meet somebody in this group. I was like, well, which person? He couldn't tell me. So then I met with somebody yesterday, and he was like, okay, this is the person we're going to meet with. We're going to meet with them next week. And they'll need the following 15, pairs of tennis shoes or whatever, right?
Yeah, so it's getting the meeting, right? With the right person. So it's got to be somebody who has a mission problem and money.
Right.
Right. Mission problem and money. So
Right.
finding that person is really hard, right?
Right.
I used to tell people would come up and interview me, want to talk to me. I was the OSC staff. I said, listen, you're talking to the wrong person. I'm not buying anything. There's no enterprise license here, right? You need to be down at NavAir, ACC, Forces Command, or Army Futures Command in the Army, where you got a 3 or 4 star who has a problem with some money.
Right.
That's who you're trying to sell to, right? If you're
Right.
talking to me, you're wasting your time. If you're down at brigade level, you're wasting anything. They got no money. Division has no money. It's got to be at the 3-star, 4-star level who has a real mission problem and then is willing to innovate to try and solve it.
But the other thing I'm finding is that even when I had that, I had to have a better contract vehicle. And I thought I had it, and it wasn't enough. I had to find like a really strong sole source, or else they were like, it's too long.
So if you can do a JNA, right, you know, and because you're the only one who can do the thing, right, and they
Right.
they market research can prove it, right. So that requires work on the part of the KO and the sponsor,
Right.
and they don't want to do that work. So you kind of got to help them. And the other thing, the trick I learned was get a 8A and C.
Found a Seneca Nation, and I'm
Yeah.
partnering with them.
Right.
And
And
they
then,
are
then you can sole
Nation.
source. There's no paperwork, and I think they've raised. It used to be 20 million, but now it's like they've raised the ceiling.
110.
Wow, yeah. So, and I was doing data projects. It's hard to spend that much money on a data project. So,
Right.
and then once you have good, what's it, CPARS ratings
Yep.
the first year,
Yep.
it's up to the KO how high the ceiling goes.
Right.
Right. So you know, KISS has to get your good CPARS ratings, and then you can do $200 million on the same vehicle if
Right.
the KO lets you. Right.
Right.
And the other trick I learned is bury the high salary person in maintenance as an ODC.
Really?
Yeah, so
Interesting.
that the KO doesn't get upset about the $400 an hour labor rate for your smart person.
Right.
So make it maintenance and bury it in maintenance and as an ODC, because they don't care about ODCs.
Right.
That's the other little trick I learned, painfully, but I did learn it. Because they obsess about labor rates for some reason. You know,
Right.
you know, you want a redheaded, left-handed, 6'6" F-16 pilot who can do Python, and they don't want to pay $500 an hour. It's like,
Right.
well, they cost $500 an hour. You know, get over it, right? No,
Right.
you're going to lose that conversation with the KO. So you bury it in maintenance. So you have a $2 million line for annual maintenance, and that covers the person's salary.
Fascinating.
Yeah, that's another little
Yeah.
trick I learned. It's legal too.
Yeah. Yeah, because we were thinking about doing it for data analytics and some other use case entry
Well, so
development.
to do that, you as the Govy have to kind of understand what's a reasonable pass-through rate
Right.
for your ANC. You know,
Right.
you're not getting gouged on a 20% pass-through. Where
Yeah.
you're paying. So you got to know, you got to be fairly smart about what should cost is.
So what the other thing is we started to do was we said with our partner on this was that because they have a SOCOM background, they're actually helping part of the production system. So they actually are part of it, not just a pass through. I don't think that's a good relationship.
If you can make so when you lower the drag on the contracting side,
Mhm.
right, everybody wins.
Right.
Right. And you get more for less, right? And so it's a win-win.
Right.
But I would say the 8A and C and then buried in ODCs.
Mhm.
So I wanted Gartner licenses. I
God.
wanted to go to DoD CIO to get Gartner licenses. It was an incredibly painful process.
Yep.
If I made it an ODC and the vendor bought it for me and gave me the license,
Yep.
no pain, no
Yep.
pain, right? So all the stuff I learned painfully.
Try to get Bloomberg. That was super fun.
Yeah.
It took me a year, and then I got it. I installed it, and they were like, "We don't know how to use it."
Oh, really? Yeah.
You asked for it, so I had to actually learn what they wanted to do, learn how to do that, and then write a manual for it.
Yeah. So we have one at IDA, you know, and we have 4 or 5 people know how to make it sit up and talk. I'm not one of
Yeah.
them. But you know, if you're in that line of work, you got to have that resource.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
It's,
but it's
you know,
100K. Well, so depending on which kind of license you get, you know, we wanted to.
but make it an ODC and make it the person who can make it sit up and talk part of the maintenance cost as part of the ODC. So it's not a separate salary thing. Right.
Right.
And that way you're
Yeah,
covered.
because I have one of those people that I do that with. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That was one of the things I learned painfully. because I had a $450 an hour data scientist that nobody wanted to pay for. But to get what I needed done, I needed him. So
Right. That's nothing compared to Oracle people. They average like 500.
oh, they're assholes too. Yeah. So I made it a maintenance thing. We buried it in an ODC, and it worked out fine. Yeah.
Interesting.
Which made the KO happy because the labor costs were down. It looked like we're buying subscriptions, and it worked out fine. And so I had a couple low, the PM and the couple flunkies that were doing the slides from the ANC were the labor pool, and everything else was buried in ODCs.
Fascinating. So Chuck, you guys just bury everything in ODCs and you're good to go.
If there was nothing else I got from this conversation, and there was a truckload of stuff I got from this conversation, that may be the most valuable.
Yeah.
Because we're all about labor cost and trying to figure out, how to do that. And full disclosure, we don't do any business with the federal government at the moment. So because we haven't sort of figured out, like we have a talent part, we have, looking at what is necessary, we can find the people to do it, but we just haven't been able to get through all of the things that Kevin just explained, specifically about the labor cost. Because, like he said, people cost what they cost.
Right.
How do you account for that? And what line item does that go in? That is brilliant.
So you'd be doing like the Joint Service Provider, which does IT for the Pentagon, right?
Mm-hmm.
They wrote that contract, and somebody new wins it, but they hire all the people from the old contract. So the same people on the same desk with the same phone number, but a different company they're working for, right? And they go back to zero on leave, and then no TSP, no 401k. So those contracts are insider deals, and they're not really full and open competition, despite what you might think.
Right.
And I wouldn't waste my time chasing them.
But there's other stuff that can go toward, like if I have a unique need for integration of a project across my group, that's what they would be going after or something like that. Right.
So, and it's a complex mission. And if you don't know it, you come in as an outsider, you're not really going to be technically qualified to do it. And it's not worth the time bidding on it. The DISA contracts is the same way. Don't waste your time on those.
Stay away from DISA. It's a hot mess. It's like 1996 technology. So
DLA, I went out. I got roped in by Leantha Sumter, who ran procurement for DoD for many years, and wanted a CIO person. I got forced to go out and set a DLA with this contract recompete for their monster IT support contract, and they had this really weird segmentation of IT that I didn't match anything I'd ever seen in my entire life. So I asked the CIO when I was out there, I says, how did you come up with the shred? Well, the answer was they have J codes, J31, J33, J42, J56. It was basically organized so that every organizational part of DLA could get their preferred subcontractor on the vehicle. It wasn't about organizational IT. It was about the organizational structure. So the contract mapped to the organizational structure so they could get their preferred subcontractor and subcontractor continuing on the new vehicle. Right. So it's not free and open competition. It was just, we want to have the same old people we got now. That's not obvious from the outside, but from the inside is the way it works. So wasting your time bidding on that contract is a complete waste of time and money.
Those are also low-end contracts. I mean, they're
right. There's no margin there. There's no margin there, but they're scraping the bottom here, right?
Yeah.
So you get in there and you win the contract, but you don't make any money.
Right.
So it's a double whammy. But why waste your time putting the proposal together to win when you're not going to make any money? So don't do it.
Right.
So if you got something cool, sell it commercially. When you have your private island and you're drinking cool cold ones and you feel wanting to be helpful, then decide about maybe doing business with DoD.
Right. I think that there are pockets where you can find the people that want different types of books, but you do have
SOCOM,
to sell it.
Little piece parts here and there.
Right.
You can make a little bit of money at DARPA, but no real money because it doesn't scale. It's a valley of death, and you don't sell at scale. So if you want to pick up nickels in front of a steamroller, that's a model. It's just not fun.
So I think the biggest thing that you'll see, like where the margins are. There's the low end margin, which is people. The high end margins are equipment. And the more kinetic your equipment is, the higher that is. So I would argue in that space, especially because they're doing so much like in, protecting their UAV, capacities, being able to have a software capacity that does a better job on protecting some of those kinetic and UAV type of activities is going to be a really interesting project to roll into, because everybody will need it.
Right. So the problem there is going to be, and this is finding a knowledgeable government who understands that problem.
Right.
All right. So you got Peter Heinemann gets it right, but who's the next person?
That'd be my friend that's up at the Battle Lab who we just did a whole bunch of, but who knows? Bureau of Prisons. That's one of their biggest problems.
So if it's on the R&D side, that's cool, but we're on the mission side.
No, the Bureau of Prisons has a problem because they're actually actively having to deal with this. Yes.
Yeah. So I'm watching the National Nuclear Security Administration, who is not managing their drone program. It's 1,000 flowers growing and it's total chaos. And they're going to have a problem here at some point because they're not managing. Everybody's doing their own drone thing.
Yep.
Right. Their own cybersecurity, their own IT, how they're connected, how they're managed, the whole supply pipeline, who's doing supply chain risk management of where the goddamn thing was built, and it's all over the map, and they got a problem, right? Because nobody owns drones.
Right.
All right. They didn't create a PM drone shop, which is what they needed to do, and make everybody go to the centralized thing and get what they need. And they didn't do that. So they're going to have a problem. They have a problem right now. It's going to get worse. DoD's a little bit different, but not that much. The replicator thing is so close hold, but everybody's doing stuff outside of replicator. So, where are we at? Nobody knows.
Right. Right.
So if who's managing the cybersecurity, who's doing the supply chain risk management, how do you know these things don't phone home to China? Where they were built. All the motors are built in China, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
You can't buy a motor that wasn't built in China.
Right.
The motor to make the propeller go. So, if you were a nation state actor, would you put some phone home software in the motor?
Well, that's no problem now, according to the latest thing from Biden, isn't it? Thou shalt not have anything from China in your stuff.
Yeah, well, the problem is we don't have any organic manufacturing capability. So can you buy it in Finland? Can you buy it in Belgium? If not, what are you going to do, right?
I thought Israelis had some.
Well, they have a bunch of stuff too, but I mean, some of the materials, like the critical transuranic minerals, come out of China.
Yeah.
Because of EPA, we can't do it here in the U.S., and so they've just recently put some controls in on some critical rare earth kind of minerals that they're kind of firing back at us and not taking it on the chin. And so this is tit for tat kind of economic warfare. And we'll see what happens. But it's going to get ugly. It's already pretty ugly. It's going to get uglier. And then, it's just big today. They busted up a big Chinese ring and have been infiltrating the infrastructure.
Yeah.
To have all the electrical grid go down on one day when we don't want it to.
We play checkers and they're in 4D chess.
Well, they're playing Go.
Yeah, that's true.
Right. And then I read a good article last night that a guy sent me about despite all the sanctions, Russian manufacturing capacity for weapons is higher than all of Europe combined. All right. So one of the scenarios is they cut the land bridge to Kaliningrad and isolate Lithuania, Latvia, that whole crew up there, and say, now what?
So, but you're hearing the language coming out of that organization as, we're interested in rolling out the first candle. What are you going to do now?
Yeah. So it's just going to get ugly, right? And we're playing checkers and they're playing Go.
So
right? The Russians are playing chess. We're playing checkers. The Chinese are playing Go.
But
and so we may think we're winning, but we're not.
No.
And if you look at manufacturing capacity, right? So before World War II, one of the big discussion points on the Japanese general staff, or what it was was manufacturing capacity, not right now, but potential manufacturing capacity. So a bunch of people in the Japanese Army staff who thought going to war with the U.S. was a really, really, really bad idea because we had enormous manufacturing capacity. We hadn't done it yet, but we had the capacity. And so they attacked us, and then we built that capacity. We were rolling B-17s off the line at like 5 a day, right? And ship them cross country on Route 66 with special bridges we built. And so if you look at it right now, China has a manufacturing capacity, not us.
Right.
Right.
Right. I'm hearing that the Koreans are building out theirs out too.
They're a small place. I mean, they're a pimple on the butt of the elephant. You know, they're part of the problem, right? But I mean, they have limited access to materials. It's a very small country, right? They don't have a lot of organic minerals. So they're selling stuff to the Russians, but it's chump change. Not land lease like we did with the Russians in World War II, right? With thousands and thousands of trucks.
Right.
So it's if you look at the manufacturing capacity, you ought to think twice about getting into a tussle with China, right? Because
I mean, some of the things I've been looking at lately is really pushing the envelope on the rare earths and moving the technologies away from some of those, right? And there's the IP is out there. And this is sort of a key area that we're looking at is what is the scalability of that battery capacity, right? And then manufacturing it. And that was one thing we did in our last project that we did really well was developing that scaling manufacturing capacity. And so that's a key area that I'm sort of focusing on.
Well, the other part is, China's kind of bought sub-Saharan Africa.
Yes.
Right. And which is where a lot of these minerals come from. Right. So, we took our eye off the ball because we were fighting brush wars for 20 years.
They own the one that we have in California. We don't even own our own rare earths in California.
And we sold them, right? Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's just, the economic benefit of just in time overtook the need to have capacity.
Right.
Right. So we're there. We have one plant that makes 155 shells, right? We buy plutonium from the Russians. That was a post-Cold War deal. We had a plant in Ohio that we built to do it, and we agreed to not do that and buy it from them.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. It was part of the Cold War dial down thing. So we're actually paying them money to do stuff we could do organically and should be doing organically. It's just depressing here. The more you read, the more you get depressed. Yeah.
All right. Well, it's almost it's like 9:30, and I've called you guys late, and I appreciate everybody being on. And thanks, Chuck and Kevin. And next month we're going to do corporate zombies. So
that'll be fun. All right.
Your best stories on corporate zombies.
See ya.
All right. Thanks, guys. See you later.
Thank
All
you.
right. Bye-bye.
Take care.
All right, you too. Bye-bye. All right. We went super.